October 3rd, meeting of the Water Quality Management Committee, 7:30 School Administration Building, will come to order. Tonight's agenda starts with something that Steve Layton has been working on for the last 6 months and wanted to share with the rest of the committee and with our nationwide television audience. The Oyster Pond CWNP. Here to give a presentation on where they have gone so far at Rice Pierce is Ed Leonard, and we have a couple of folks from the Oyster Pond area who, by all means, jump in at any time with comments or questions. If you do, you'll need a microphone, and if Matt's not here, you can use his, and if he's not, we'll think of something else. But anyway, Ed Leonard. Or Steve, do you want to do the introductions here, or how do you want to do it?
Either way, we're happy to have Ed Leonard here from Wright Pierce, who is going to present the first part, the draft of the first part of the CWMP, known as the needs assessment. And I'll turn it over to Ed.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me here tonight to go through the project where we are to date. And I want to thank the members of the public that came out tonight, as well as gave us some comments in advance on the reports, and I think in general we get some good insightful comments. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the team and what we've done so far and where we're at in the project, and then open it up for questions for as long as you guys want. For the consultant team, Wright Pierce is the lead. We also have Woods Hole Group, which helped us with the marine science, pond science elements of the project, and LEC, Environmental Consultants, which helped us with the terrestrial endangered species type elements of the project. We obviously had town staff involved and a working group of this committee involved. The Oyster Pond CWMP, the driver for this project is the TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Load Report, that was prepared by the Mass Estuaries Project, forwarded by DEP to EPA, and which was approved. What we're doing is what's called the targeted CWMP, so it's focusing on not the whole town, but just one watershed. We're looking to identify water quality needs, solutions, costs, determine what the best alternative is, develop a recommended plan, and then submit that through the MEPA process for the Oyster Pond watershed. So this is a 2-year project with 3 major tasks. We're in the first task now. We started in February. The draft report was issued in August. The next 2 tasks would be to identify, develop, screen alternatives, and then develop the recommended plan. We're targeting completion around February 2015. The watershed is shown on the map here, which is sort of a teardrop shaped line. This is the recharge watershed. This is where a drop of water that gets in the ground eventually makes its way to Oyster Pond. The watershed is largely residential. It's largely developed. There's only about 8% of the remaining land, vacant land, is actually developable. We reviewed 5 years worth of water use data for each parcel in the watershed and came up with an estimated volume of about 31,000 gallons per day is the total water use in the watershed. We further estimated that the wastewater use is about just under 29,000 gallons a day. That's 10.5 million gallons a year of wastewater. Oyster Pond itself is 63 acres. It has a maximum depth of 6 meters. About 80% of the pond volume, pond area, is shallower than 4 meters, and about 90% by volume is shallower than 4 meters. 4 meters is important in this pond because that's the elevation threshold that the TMDL sets for compliance. This was originally it's a kettle hole pond, and when the glaciers were still here, sea level was well below the sill elevation of the pond. So when the glaciers receded, before sea level came up, they were freshwater ponds. As sea level crept up, crested what was the beach, flooded the ponds, and then they became saltwater ponds. The name Oyster Pond came from the fact that it had oysters for hundreds of years. Longshore currents eventually closed off that opening, and it shifted to a brackish pond. That was facilitated to a greater extent by the railroad when that was put in. By the early 1900s, oysters didn't survive in the pond anymore. The 1940s, the salinity, for early records, the salinity was about what it is today, 2 to 7 parts per thousand. There was a period of time where a new culvert was put in. It increased tidal flushing of the pond and salinity went up, changed the ecosystem in there. Then a weir was put in the late 90s, which reverted it back to where it's been for about the past couple hundred years. So right now it's a brackish pond. The key issues in this pond are development, which is obviously an issue Cape-wide. Of the 225 dwelling units that are there today, 160 were built since 1977. So 70-something% were built after 77. The water column nitrogen, the upper right figure, that shows total dissolved nitrogen in the water column going back to 2004. This is OPET data. Reasonably stable. We don't have all of MEP's data to know how it compares to what the model was based on, but our estimates are that total nitrogen in the pond water column is lower than it was then.
Sorry,
So that's a good thing.
say that again.
It's lower
Lower now than it was
Than
in
it was.
2004.
in 2001
One.
when MEP did their work.
Why?
Well, there's been a couple of changes in the watershed related to storm drainage.
Okay, all right.
The other important thing, so how the pond was formed and how it, where it is today, equally important is the fact that it's a very variable system. It's not predictable, really. Unlike most other watershed or estuaries in the Cape, it stratifies vertically as opposed to horizontally. So much like a regular pond does. So there are thermal stratification that happens, there's density stratification that happens due to salinity when ocean water comes in. And then the trunk river is blocked periodically by longshore currents. It needs to be manually dredged. So some of these are predictable, seasonal turnover. Some of them aren't. Storm surges happen. They're predictable, but you don't know when. So all of these things relate to the TMDL and how compliance will be assessed. It's very variable, and it doesn't lend itself well to a very static compliance framework. The job of this task was to look at current future wastewater management needs. We looked at it in terms of 5 categories. Sanitary, maintaining sanitary conditions, protecting public and private water supplies, addressing what we call convenience and aesthetic issues, things like tight tanks, mounted systems, frequent pumping, making sure that there's the availability for folks to develop a vacant lot if they want to, as long as it's within the town's goals. We looked at those 4 factors and concluded generally that in this watershed, those are private property issues. There were no overriding compelling issues that warranted a public solution on that matter. With regard to nutrient enrichment, whoops, there used to be a figure there.
Yeah.
We have the TMDL that established the nitrogen removal requirements based on achieving the State Water Quality Standard SA classification at 4 meters, and essentially requires that nitrogen be managed in this watershed. It does require compliance on a sub-watershed basis, which I'll talk about in a second. What is not part of the TMDL is phosphorus. A TMDL could be written on anything. It could be written on metals, bacteria, nitrogen, phosphorus, anything. What it has been written on is nitrogen, but we believe that phosphorus is a limiting nutrient under certain conditions at certain times in the pond, and Woods Hole Group did an analysis for us to develop that. So we believe that phosphorus management is also warranted in this watershed. So compliance by subwatershed, so you think back to that teardrop, a portion of the teardrop goes to the lagoon and the rest of it goes to the pond itself. So in reading this table, you start with what's the present watershed load. You compare that to what the threshold load is. The threshold is what the regulators determine is what you need to get back to establish good quality habitat and to meet state water quality standards. If you're above the threshold, you need to manage, and if you're below, you don't. In this case, so then you go to the far right column. In this case, the Oyster Pond major watershed or main watershed is above the threshold, and the lagoon watershed, subwatershed, is not. So in aggregate, you have a 65.9% removal requirement. But if you look at the subwatersheds, one is 70, and the other is 0. So if you remove nitrogen from the subwatershed with a 0, you haven't actually made a dent in what you need for the big picture. Another figure that's missing. I apologize. The compliance strategies that for this watershed, we want to make sure that we can account for in our TMDL compliance things that have already happened, or things that we expect to happen, whether it's the local fertilizer ordinance that you've been struggling with, or whether it's something that happens regionally. Fertilizer use will be reduced, and it should be something that we get credit for. Storm drainage is another thing. Folks in the watershed have made modifications to the storm drain system. We haven't quantified that yet, but we believe that that should be accounted for as well. And the third piece is atmospheric deposition. There have been documented trends, downward trends, in how much nitrogen comes from the atmosphere, in particular since the turn of the century. And I have a slide that hopefully will show up that has some trend lines on that. But it's important because the Oyster Pond watershed MEP work was done around 2000. So there's a pretty good reduction in atmospheric nitrogen deposition since that time. We developed sort of a matrix of what we call low, medium, and high removals for these different non-septic loads. We agreed in the working group to pursue the medium, make sure that we take advantage of something but not be too aggressive. And that results in a overall 65% septic nitrogen removal, which is less than the 70 that was in the previous table. So we get some benefit from that. The last question, we got some questions in advance for the meeting, and I wanted to make sure I touched on them here. There was some confusion about two of the tables, table 3, 4, and 5, table 3, 4, and table 3, 5. And the purpose of these two tables was to...
Excuse me, there's some extra copies of these which we could give to the people. The members of the committee already have this.
Right, yeah, this will be for anybody who's...
You maybe can share them and so there's enough to go around.
Yeah.
The purpose of these two tables was really to illustrate the difference between in-watershed disposal and out-of-watershed disposal, whether it's as a septic system, an IA system, a cluster system, or a treatment plant. It's still, you have to fundamentally distinguish between in-watershed and out-of-watershed. So, just a quick non-specific analysis with some numbers that are easy to do in your head. If you had 100 homes in a watershed, each producing 10 pounds of nitrogen a year, that's 1,000 pounds. If you have a TMDL that says you have to get down to 400, it means you need to remove 60% of the nitrogen. If you take all that nitrogen and send it somewhere else, either treated or untreated, you've effectively taken all of it out and you have a 0 residual. So you have, to get the 60% removal, you have to address 60 homes in this easy math scenario. If you're treating and disposing in the watershed, So we're gonna assume treating to 5 milligrams per liter, which is a pretty robust system, pretty stringent limit. You collect what you need, you treat it down, you have a residual of 140 pounds a year still. Even at 5, you have a residual. That's going back in the watershed that's nitrogen sensitive. So you have to go collect more homes to treat it to 5 in order to do that. And the increment is about 24% in this scenario, which is about the difference between, in this table as well. The difference between 68 and 84 is about a 24% difference because they use the same assumptions. And it's a hypothetical plant. We put it in the main watershed, which did not have natural attenuation, so it was really an illustrative example to show the difference. So where do we go from here? We have this meeting, we have the working group that has provided some comments on the draft report. Certainly welcome any additional comments from this committee and the public and address those comments. Moving forward, we will need to decide at some point whether we pursue alternative criteria, which are whether we pursue the SA designation or not, and we can talk more about that later if you wish. We need to decide on what percentages we want to use as the baseline for the non-septic load reductions, whether it's the medium scenario or some other scenario, to determine, you know, what are we comfortable with moving forward with, and what are we going to use. I believe that we should request all of MEP's data, at least for nitrogen, so that we can compare their analysis to all the good data that OPET's collected over the past, since MEP stopped. We have a pretty good record of data. They have a pretty good record of data that they provided to us. That'll give us a better handle on where we are now versus where we were with the model. We will likely need to run additional MEP model runs, using their model to assess. We could reassess the calibration based on today's data. We could also assess alternatives that we develop in the next phase to see what it'll do from an improvement perspective. We did suggest collecting some additional data moving forward over the long term, establishing a local location to assess nitrogen deposition would be a good thing. Deploying a sonde at the Sentinel station, OP3, to get a better handle on where that stratification is, that is there all the time, it just moves up and down, and how that relates to compliance. And also maybe an algae bloom report, just a simple paper form that if there's a bloom, you look back, what were the temperatures over the past couple of days? Were there any abnormal rain events, any storm overwatch, just things to help it go from geez, I remember what happened. I think I remember what happened a year ago to this happened last week, let's write it all down. And then move into task 2 with the working group, which is identification and analysis of alternatives. That's it. I have a bunch of slides to go to address questions that might get asked, but I give it back to you.
Well, let's get the OPED people to the table here, because you're going to be part of this conversation. And you'll have to share a microphone, I guess.
If you pass the microphone around rather than putting it on the table,
Yeah.
they don't hear the scratching.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
So, questions or comments from the committee? Questions or comments from the OPED people? Would you like to start out?
Committee?
Okay, Ron.
Oh, thanks, Eric. I just have a quick one. You had, in looking at the two options, one was a sewer system as one, or removal of the full load from a household, and the other was a kind of a cluster system, in essence, in the site that would have a discharge of 5 milligrams per liter, you were assuming. And in doing that, then you would have to increase the number of houses that would be, you need to capture those nutrients if there is a discharge like that. But that's just the nitrogen side of it, right? So the phosphorus side, though, is another element, because as you said, the pond is sensitive at different times for different conditions to phosphorus, and therefore it seems that even if you did the extra 24%, the pond would still be at risk from the extra phosphorus in the effluent. So I'm just wondering how you would handle that.
Well, if we're going to agree that we should manage nitrogen and phosphorus, then the alternatives, we haven't assessed alternatives yet. We've just, those were just numbers. But
Yeah.
when we look at alternatives and say what's applicable and what's not, we need to look at things that manage phosphorus as well, so that we're not taking what's normal wastewater at 6 to 8 milligrams per liter phosphorus, doing nothing to it and putting 6 to 8 back in, because that would do exactly what you said.
Okay.
We would need to incorporate a phosphorus reduction step in either the on-site system, the cluster system, satellite system, whatever it is to mitigate that.
The issue would be, without a TMDL, there's no necessarily generally agreed upon number for phosphorus. Less is better. So it would be almost the biggest bang we can get for a buck for the alternative management strategies. You know, we don't have anything driving us like for the nitrogen. There's some ratios and things like that the scientific community can give us to strive for, but there's a big difference.
Right.
From a regulatory
Right, it's
point
not a
of view.
specific regulatory criteria, but we could derive one from the ratios of nitrogen to phosphorus and come up with a good guideline.
Yeah, I was basically just thinking about the health of the pond. I wasn't worried, the regulatory world is one part,
Yep.
but we can meet regulations and still impair the pond, so this is the element there. But
Yep,
that's a
no,
good
it's-
point. Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously it's in the picture clearly in your mind, in your work, so that's
Don't want to get the audience confused. The health of the pond is improved when water quality is improved. There's no difference. We can argue about the balanced indigenous population, whether we should have 20% of this or 30% of this, but both things work in unison. You can't meet water quality and have an unhealthy pond. You can't have an unhealthy pond and meet water quality.
right. But I think you're missing
Yeah,
the
we're gonna
point.
have this conversation through
Yeah,
the
yeah, I
chair,
think-
and you can
Oh, sorry.
participate by
Yeah.
recognizing. So, go ahead, you guys.
Well, I'd just like to say I thank you for the presentation and thank you for the needs assessment. And I really appreciate the fact that you are acknowledging the role that phosphorus plays in the health of the pond, because we've been talking about that for many years now, and it's never really been fully recognized. So that, I think that's a very good step forward. I would love to see, we would love to see some kind of data gathering at OP3. Actually, OPET ourselves, we've already also talked about trying to put some kind of data analyzer or monitoring system at OP3, because we're not able to get out there as often as we'd like to sometimes. So we think that would be a very, very useful thing to have. Also, trying to have access to the MEP data would be a fabulous thing. I know that's been pursued on many fronts for some time now, and I think that would be a very useful thing for us to be able to look at our data that we basically started collecting because we couldn't access the MEP data, and we wanted to monitor and see what was going on in the pond. And also my understanding is the MEP data was only collected in July and August, and we thought we needed to have some year-round sampling to understand the full thing going on.
Wait, what? Could you introduce yourself to
Oh,
the
sorry.
The nationwide
I'm sorry.
television audience wants
Yeah,
to-
sorry. Wendy Bissler, Executive Director of Oyster Pond Environmental Trust.
Bill Kerfoot, Vice President and Board of Directors. Specifically, I'd like to elaborate on this point with regard to the data. Because we have tried to model ourselves on what is happening within the pond area as part of a management strategy, we definitely would like to request that the MEP model be run with OPET data as well as the existing MEP data. So we'd like to follow up more specifically on that request, which we think is relevant to talking about credits you could give it in the future with regard to runoff and nitrogen reduction with fertilizer.
Just-
We can do that.
one now.
Okay, I fully appreciate the recharge zone that has been delineated. We do not have any concerns associated with that from a standpoint that that clearly represents where nitrogen is going in and where it is most likely to come down gradient in the watershed area. However, the term actual watershed normally incorporates runoff, and because we're in a moraine area, we've had to, out of necessity, to look at the actual runoff, which at one point on Ransom Road came flooding down from Woods Hole Road through a number of the neighbors' yards and was combined with the regular runoff from Ransom Road directly down into Mosquito Creek and into the pond itself. And in fact, it was so bad that it was stripping off sections of the pavement at one time when we had to redo it. This was not a small amount of water, and it was like 3 feet deep in David Bailey's yard. So we've had to work hard, working with the town and with the state, to have a whole series of catch basins put along Woods Hole Road, and then turned ourselves, created a road rehabilitation area, and did the actual installation of 4 catch basin areas along Ransom Road to try and reduce the total volume that's going into the pond area. But we presented to you that if you actually take the current recharge, or not recharge, but the actual runoff from storm events, like certainly tropical storms, that it enlarges the area from the bounds now of the recharge area. And that's been important for us to try and intercept that and control that in the future. That comes into play primarily from the Woods Hole Highway and Ransom Road on the northern side, but secondarily also on Mosquito Creek, where they both flows combine, and also they can get quite an inflow during a tropical storm from what we refer to as the Yanish property land, the Hui property land behind.
Steve?
Bill, thank you. Is that consistent with saying that what Ed mentioned about reduction since the MEP report in nitrogen delivery via stormwater runoff, that the reduction might be even greater than you would otherwise think because of all the work that you did on Ransom Road?
We think that we can go through some documentation of stormwater interception at least, and show that in one of the 3A3 type scenarios, we propose that a 30% reduction off surface water runoff situations, and that ties into what we'd like to try to document in the future to look at that alternative. So that is an important thing. Also improving the condition of the outflow from Mosquito Creek into the pond.
Jerry?
It might actually be a net reduction, but if you increase the watershed capture area, you're now increasing the nitrogen capture area. So there would have to be an academic or stormwater addition for additional nitrogen putting in, and that will be balanced off with the amount of nitrogen you hope to have taken out by stormwater remediation.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but ironically, that was the actual watershed flow that was coming in at the time at which before 2004, which represented the actual flows that were being measured from Mosquito Creek. So what we're saying then is, since that time, we have intercepted that and reduced that. So you might say, okay, you're asking for an extension of watershed, but maybe you've reduced that watershed area, and that's fine. We'll take that as a credit then.
Yeah, Ed, could you go back again about the atmospheric deposition and what I guess maybe you had a graph that you were hoping to show that. Okay.
So it is there. It's
Oh,
good.
it is there. It just didn't show up. Because in your one graph that you have here, you're showing it dropping quite substantially over time. And I'm just, if you could talk a little bit more about how you came up with the numbers and what the data is behind that.
Sure.
That's-
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're referring to there, but the.
Yeah, it's, let's see, it's in the graph.
Oh, that, yeah, okay.
3-3.
Those were the range, those are the ranges that we discussed from the low, medium, high.
Uh-huh.
Essentially, not aggressive, middle road, aggressive, is to use different, for emotional words that go with it, but we picked the middle of the road scenario. The graph on the left is from a paper that was published in 2001, specifically looking at atmospheric deposition on Cape Cod. And it looked at the time period basically of the 20th century. And it showed a highly variable, obviously, but an increasing trend through the century. It also had a really interesting correlation between location, latitude and longitude as to how much atmospheric deposition there was. And it's difficult, or I suppose you can calculate the correlation between two given points based on, I guess, the jet stream. So the conclusion of this 2001 paper was it's increased, nitrogen deposition has increased through the century. It appears to be stabilized and may in fact be beginning a downward trend, but we can't tell towards the end of the century, and recommended that this be aggressively monitored by the government scientists. It's sort of been done. I guess there's nothing quite as comprehensive in 10 pages that, but there's reams of data out there from EPA and some other Hubbard Brook long-term ecological, I forget the R, LTER, that there are sites throughout the country that monitor wet deposition and dry deposition. Not as much data on dry deposition. There's a pretty good record on wet deposition, which is basically what comes down with the rain. I put two graphs on here on the right. One is from Abington, Connecticut, which had a reasonably longer term data set for wet and dry, going back to 1995-ish. Those reductions, I think, are in the 20 to 30% range from the mid-90s. And the bottom data set is from Hubbard Brook, which is in kind of middle of New Hampshire. And that goes back, this is just wet deposition, and it goes back to 1980. And it shows, if you overlay the lower right with the upper left, it's pretty much the same trend line. If you were to look at just the data from 1980 to 2000 in the Bowen Valley Yellow work, it's about the same trend. And then if you look at 2000 to present, it's substantially negative to the better as far as that deposition goes. So there's a study that's being done, or was done, in New Hampshire by their equivalent of the DEP in New Hampshire. They're dealing with similar issues in their Great Bay, which is an inland estuary, similar issues to what's going on here. They've looked at EPA data to establish what nitrogen emissions were in 2000 and what EPA projects the emissions to be by 2020. And that difference is 65% based on EPA numbers. Now, emissions don't equal deposition, and the correlation isn't firm, but clearly it's heading in the direction that's going to benefit Cape Cod. So we think it's prudent to put a number out there. We don't know that DEP is going to approve it, but it seems like something that should stick. We have talked to EPA, somebody who's been involved in Connecticut DEP's work. Connecticut DEP included an 18% atmospheric deposition reduction in their TMDL for Long Island Sound that they wrote in 2000. They're currently revising that TMDL. They're analyzing whether they met the various criteria. Their conclusion is, it's not published yet, but their conclusion is that they've met and exceeded the 18, and they're trying to figure out how much more they can get for credit, and I guess that's something we should keep our eye on, what Connecticut DEP is publishing in their TMDLs.
And this would affect all of our estuaries and probably all of Cape Cod's estuaries in a similar way.
Right. It's not static. and it's not what MEP is using in their models, which is from the late 90s.
Right.
So go ahead.
Virginia, does that speak to your
Yes.
email question?
Yeah, I think it was important to dig deeper and to check whether this is really, let's call it a region-wide trend. And you've done that. I think you've responded well.
Thanks.
Can I just ask why the numbers are going down? Is it because of cleaner car emissions? Are they capturing that, or is it also because of the factory smokestack?
I think it's both.
It's
It's the
both.
Clean Air Act and it's mobile vehicle emissions, mobile emissions.
Okay.
I think most of the projections from today, 2012, 13 to 2020, are not, that it's only 10%, I think, in reduction in emissions, and I think that's because the big grabs have already happened with the Clean Air Act and the static emissions, static emissions, and now it's the mobile emissions with fuel efficiency standards.
Erica?
Yeah, Steve?
And so this reduction and the reduction possibly in the runoff from Woods Hole Road and so on, is that consistent with the bottom line, which is the nitrogen concentration in the pond, or is that why you have to wait for the MEP data?
Well, I guess this in conjunction with the stormwater modifications, I think it would be reasonable to conclude that the nitrogen in the water column is reduced. We have only dissolved data. The dissolved fraction data is what OPEC collects. What MEP did was dissolved and particulate. So we had to guess on the particulate based on historic data. Woods Hole Group looked at what was available for data and developed a correlation. The range was 16 to 30-something% particulate to total.
If I may?
Sure.
I just want to remind the committee that we've contracted with SMAS to get the historic data from 2004 to present. And very soon, the Oyster Pond data was one of those data sets. So that should, the data set from 2004 to 2012 from SMAS in an Excel spreadsheet that can be manipulated, it should be
And that
coming.
will include the particulate?
It will include all the things that are, yes, the total.
Everything they monitor.
So
And
if-
phosphorus and chlorophyll and dissolved oxygen and all the
So-
parameters that are in the
So if you
MEP.
look at that data then, and it's down, you'll say, as the old joke goes, isn't science wonderful? But if it's not down, then you have to scratch your head, right?
You do, but I guess when you look at the pond itself, going back to the variability piece, there's an awful lot that happens in that pond. It's been highly studied. It's fascinating. The Emory book is fascinating, and I've read it like twice just to make sure I really got it. And still, it's complicated and difficult to understand, and it's really difficult to model because the model is done on you have to make assumptions, you have to normalize, you have to use averages in order to make a model that's not hyper complicated, and it's complicated as it is. So take a highly variable pond and it just makes it.
Yeah, this is a very different kind of pond than we've been dealing with up till now for the last 2 years. All the ones from Falmouth Harbor to the east are similar, and this one isn't.
No, this is fairly unique. I mean, it's not, I'm sure it's not the only one like this. There's a couple along your west shore that probably do something similar, but it's unique in the MEP program from what I've read, from the reports that I've read.
Well, we certainly appreciate the effort of the town in moving forward with funds for having this looked at in more detail. From our standpoint, looking back to 1997 area to now, we could definitely see that the nitrogen levels have decreased. The question is, what are the sources and the flows and retention times that are tied with this, and how does it work into best management for the future? And we appreciate the effort that you're putting into it. Now, One comment, though, that we did have from our board, though, of when you're talking about middle ground alternatives, is that the board clearly has indicated that it wants swimmable, fishable conditions, and that on the consideration of oxygen levels, the 3.5 shouldn't be considered at the present time. Possibly the 5, certainly the 6, but not the 3.5, because it is not consistent with the swimmable, fishable conditions.
Ron?
No, I was just going to ask, but I think you answered, Bill. You said the nitrogen in the water has been going down from what you've been measuring. Is that right?
The total nitrogen content has been going down. At the time, way back, and this is even before the culvert period, when there was such a bloom that you couldn't even row across an area in a canoe. Concentrations were at 1 part per million at that time, and a number of conditions may have contributed to that, such as a collapsed culvert, not really a full realization of the total amount of nitrogen which was coming in at that time, or phosphorus. So part of the reason why OPET was formed and also continues and started its own monitoring in 2004 was to try and have information on a regular basis that could be used for management. And there is no question that the weir is working at the present time to maintain good conditions. People do swim and they fish, I fish too, in there. So many things are working, but they still, we want to move forward meeting the TMDL also.
If I may, since you bring up the weir, I think it's also we need to talk about the weir is doing its job as far as keeping, it's helping to maintain the salinity by keeping the highest tides out of the pond, but it is still not acting as it should, because I just heard today from one of our people who are the most concerned with herring, Lou Turner, one of our members, that this continues to happen every time we have a large storm, is storm sand and eelgrass gets pushed up into Trunk River, gets dumped into the lagoon, but there's not enough outflow coming out of the pond to push that back out, and so that builds up, and so the weir is not actually functioning to as it should. It's actually this lump of eelgrass or sand, either in the lagoon or the trunk, that is controlling the flow out of the pond. And there's been very little outflow recently from the pond. So that's another consideration that has to be thought of when it comes to the management of the pond and management of the nitrogen levels, because when the outflow is cut off, we tend to get an increase in the nitrogen levels. So that's a long-term management problem that needs to be taken into consideration. And we've worked very well with Chuck Martinson and DPW. We've cleaned out that area several times in the past 8 to 9 years, and it needs to be done again right now. So it's something that needs to be thought of.
Comments or questions from anybody in the committee or the audience?
Linda, you want to pursue any of Barry's questions or anything like that?
Well,
Could you get our microphone? Good, thanks.
Hi. I'm Linda Jones, and I'm the chair, I guess I am, yeah, the chair of the board at Treetops Condominiums, and I'm kind of here to understand what everybody read the findings, and I'm here as an individual, but also as part of Treetops Condominiums. And so I was looking at Barry's questions and had some of the same ones, which was the fact that there are 62 units, and how do we take that into account? And so I'll be happy to make sure that we provide you with the information that you've requested on all these different areas, which will then be able to update your data and become more relevant in the findings. But I think that other than the fact that we owe you information, I'm not quite sure that there's any questions that I have that's come up based on the data, other than the fact that we really are hoping that this is certainly an improvement to the pond and also equitable for all the people that are involved at the pond. I mean, that's one of the things that we certainly look at as a group of 62 people or 62 unit owners.
If I could just address one thing on that. It's been talked about numerous times that Treetops is one parcel with 62 units, and Steve's said that probably at every meeting we've had. It was treated as one parcel because the tool that we use to kind of manage the numbers, GIS, is what the town uses as well. It's one legal parcel. We know that it's got 64 water meters and it's got different owners. There is some information we need in order to kind of take that the next step, but it's understood that it's not one party, it's lots of people.
And it was interesting looking at the data actually to see the amount of overall usage, gallons per day, that is associated with Treetops, and it was, I thought, favorable considering what other neighboring areas was doing. So we've taken some initiatives independently to be able to reduce our water usage and to reduce our imprint on the pond, and hopefully some of this is beginning to have an effect longer range, and certainly want to be partners in that whole solution.
You should talk about your fertilizer.
One of the things that we've done, I forget how many years, 3 years ago, I think, somewhere around there, is that we moved to an all-organic approach and really are taking a look at the property from how do we be friendly? And really looking at right plants for the right places, really taking a look at how can we reduce, we don't have irrigation, we don't want irrigation, and yet we want a pleasant looking place. So how do we look at that from a landscaping perspective so that we create the beautiful environment that people expect to live in, but at the same point don't require the fertilization, the water, and everything else that is the trend today. So this is a focus of the board, and has been a driving focus, and we have gone now to totally organic in the approach, and certainly looking at what the implications are for the choices that we've made in terms of the nitrogen loading, and trying to make sure that the practices that we use, even though they're, quote, no longer chemical and no longer poisonous, won't have an additional negative effect. So we're trying to be as, the pond is our asset. I mean, we enjoy it, we love it. It helps us in terms of our property values. It helps us in terms of the quality of life that we all have. So it just makes sense to do all that we can to be able to preserve it and to create a wonderful environment. So we're partners in this.
Great.
Jerry.
I don't know if you asked it, but could you send that information that, you have low flow toilet, or whatever you did for water conservation. I think one of the other thing is to understand that your total flow does represent your year-round and your seasonal, so it gets all blended together.
Yeah.
And I think someone had mentioned there was a water pipe break, and maybe we could, I don't know if that changes the flow, but that explains that outlier. There was one year where the flow was way up there.
That wasn't at Treetops.
Oh, okay.
That was private resident.
Right.
It's
No,
just-
what you're pointing to is from what we first began discussions with Treetops and trying to estimate what their flow was for the system that was needed. We were at that time, from what information Barry provided, at 6,000 gallons per day, and now you're down to 4,000 there. So the question comes, is this internal, and if it's due to water-saving devices within the unit, then
You should
it
take credit
can
for
be
it.
done.
Yeah, that's
A
great.
lot of it's education.
Yep.
I mean, it really, we just spend a lot of time in terms of educating people. That's part of our annual meeting, is helping people understand the impacts of the choices that they make when they use various detergents, various just things like that, friendly hints. But awareness that when they were replacing certain things, that these are some of the alternatives that they might want to be looking at that would have a benefit. So it's educational more than anything else.
Earl and Hilda, right behind you there.
I just wanted to point out that it's a good thing to reduce the amount of water you use, but the amount of nitrogen leaving the house and the human waste will be the same, no matter how much water you put in with it.
Okay, Ron?
Well, I
Or Hilda?
Oh.
I was wondering if in your comparisons of your alternatives that you might look at, will you also consider the resource recovery of any of the systems you're looking at? Because right now it's still how to get rid of the nitrogen, either moving it from one watershed to another place. But it doesn't seem to include resource recovery. And if we start with that, then a lot of things will fall in place and be resolved. If that's a very primary objective, is to recover the resources.
Well, I'd love to find a community that wants to do that, because it would be fascinating. Generally, historically, it's only really been cost effective in larger installations, just because of the cost that goes into it. But at small scale, small site locations, it might be. I mean, it's a good point for us to consider in the working group on what alternatives are in the mix.
I would like to see the data that you have for what you just said. How you based that conclusion that you just had, where you based it on.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think the report that he's presented to us is on our website, am I right?
It is.
Good.
Yeah.
So that's a good start. Okay.
No, I just had a question. Well, how long ago did you start the all organic processing?
I think it's either 3 or 4 years.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
Great.
I just have a question of interest. To what extent was the Falmouth Friendly Lawns program helpful in getting people to actually think about this?
I think people were maybe aware of it, but I have to honestly say that when I came on board as the chair, this had been an important thing. I had a property management business in Florida, and we had gone through that whole process. And when I kind of started living there and started seeing how we were managing things, I thought from an economic end as well as from environmental end that there was better options. So I think it was a combination of the whole atmosphere of the community, which is certainly the Falmouth approach, but then adding to that some individuals' experience trying to bring us to another level.
Mm-hmm. Great. Virginia.
What's the next step? You've had a very favorable review, I would say, this evening. What's the next step and what's the timeline?
The next steps are to identify alternatives, a broad range of alternatives that we can then apply to solve the nitrogen and phosphorus issues in the watershed. Meet with the working group to establish which of those alternatives or which combinations of those alternatives that we want to then develop criteria to evaluate them, develop cost estimates for. Those are the next couple of steps, and then report back out to this committee on the findings of the alternative screening and analysis. Probably, and I think when we last discussed, it would be 4 or so months.
4 months? Okay.
To
go
4 to 6
through the
months.
alternatives and the screening of the alternatives.
Right, man.
Okay.
Task 1 was about 6 months, task 2 is about 6 months, and then I think the last one will take probably a year just because of environmental reviews and whatnot. So I think we need to keep on the 6-month track to get through that.
Okay.
Steve and Jerry, then let's wrap it up.
If I can just go back to the atmospheric deposition one again. I mentioned comparing what you think is happening in the atmosphere to what we measure in the pond. And so that's difficult with oyster pond because it's so complicated. But then Eric pointed out that, obviously correctly, that that applies to all the estuaries. Is there another estuary where we have data where it's simpler, where you can compare it and see if it has in fact, and there aren't confounding variables like development or something over the same period, and there's a small enough amount of noise in the system where you could say, see, it
Not to think
correlate.
about that, because they're, what other water, you have to look at watersheds that are relatively small, that have maybe made modifications in the system, where the growth has been similar over the similar time period. I don't know, I have to think about where we have MEP reports that have been published and how they might be similar or different. It would be an interesting thing to look at.
It's just administrivia. The immediate next step would, he's going to take all this information and use his professional judgment and call this final. Make some adjustments, that there's some confusing things about the MEP report, so that, we got to move on, wrap this up. I guess if we still have a glaring error, we'll either do a rata sheet or correct it in the next stages. But, just so we can wrap up the task. I don't know about, the atmosphere, if SIPA-WISIT, or we want to try to get the county to say, or even the state, maybe this is more of a regional approach to trying to get better atmospheric deposition, because it will impact the town as a whole. Even if we can't quantify it in oyster pond, it's one of those things we're going to, if it's happening, we're getting credit for it in any case.
Sure. Sure.
The monitoring will show that.
I just quickly, going back to the MEP data, do you have a timeline on when that will be available?
Before.
Yes.
Pardon?
For sure before Christmas. The deadline just came up.
So it'll be a Christmas gift?
Christmas, what year?
We just passed the deadline. Have to check in, see where it's at, but
It's forthcoming.
Yeah.
But that tells you something. If you're saying we just passed the deadline and C is saying Christmas.
I said
No,
Christmas.
no, he said Christmas. I said.
I'm the pessimist.
Oh.
We've had a very good working relationship lately with SMAS, and we've been getting stuff
On
in
time.
a timely manner and
Okay.
in the way we wanted to get it. So
That's
I'm hopeful
wonderful.
that
That's great
this
news.
year's Christmas will
Yes,
be a
okay,
gift.
that's great. Thank you.
That is a reasonable question, which Christmas?
We know.
Nana.
Is everybody happy with what Jerry just said about finalizing it?
Yeah.
I certainly am.
Yep.
And just one note on
To
this.
the extent we keep going with this, all three of you, I hope, are going to be in this conversation. The treetops folks have a lot, you have a lot at stake here, and you have a lot of helpful knowledge, so you definitely want to have the view at the table.
I also wonder if we could possibly get a copy of the presentation this evening. That way I can post it on our website. And then eventually, hopefully, we'd have a link to the actual video of tonight's meeting. Do you want to say something?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
So-
well, thank you very much.
So-
And,
Do you
You can
want
just
any
send
sort
me
of a
this.
motion?
yeah, do we need a motion here? What,
Even better, of course.
presentation and
Steve?
discussion?
This
Isn't
isn't-
really-
You mean that we accept this?
Is he going to make some changes?
Yes, he's going to incorporate a lot of these
Okay.
Okay.
suggestions, so I'm not
Okay.
sure what the
So
motion
we
would
will
be.
see a final document.
Yes.
Okay,
This is
then
the draft, so we
then
should hold off.
we'll hold off on the motion.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is town meeting articles, discussion and vote on recommended amendments. And the committee will remember we recommended 3 potential articles for the upcoming town meeting to the Board of Selectmen. They put all 3 of them in the warrant, and we were at their meeting last Monday where 3 of our members presented more details about what these articles were about. And we got some comments from the selectmen and from others along the way here, so there are a few possible amendments that we want to take up and then send the revised recommendation for the motion that will be made at town meeting to the Board of Selectmen for their consideration this next Monday night. So the first one of these three is the flow neutral bylaw. I think everyone has a copy of that with the red lines showing.
Yes.
Frank Duffy made a major change, which was he wanted to keep the New Silver Beach piece intact and separate. So the new introduction that he drafted does that. There were a couple of other changes. So you want to go through these changes that are being offered and
You bet.
and vote on them?
So under the purpose, these changes are directly from Town Council's office to ensure that we're keeping the two bylaws separate. There was numbering changes to reflect the fact that New Silver Beach is staying intact and separate as Article 7, and this would be Article 8 in the Town Code. And then from the Planning Board, there were two changes. One is to add where we have a square footage of lot area to just be explicit that we're talking about square feet of lot area. So the Planning Board wanted that clarification, which is what it is. And then the last change were the working group sought to write language that was very clear that for variances, so I'm in the section variances in the sewer service area 180, now 18056, to say that the first criteria that had to be met was that the wastewater superintendent verified that the flow capacity was available for any variances that were to be granted, and then the Board of Selectmen would get a referral from the Board of Health stating that a Title V system could be sited on the property without substantial changes, or the Board of Selectmen could find it didn't derogate from the purposes and intent of the bylaw to allow the variance, even if they couldn't cite a Title V system. So the change from the town planner is to clarify that. We had the committee, the working group had written it a certain way, and the town planner and I think other members of the working group felt that it could be said even more clearly than it was said. So strike the first way it's said and insert the second way it's said. And Frank Duffy Town Council preferred the second way of stating it. But what it says is not different. It's just said in a way that makes it obvious. The other change, the last change that Town Council asked for is under the last section 18061 violations. He wanted to return the line that written notice on number 1 that that there's written notice stating the nature and violation as a repeat of what's in other parts of the bylaw, but he wanted it repeated here. So those are the changes.
Okay, and didn't we have one from one of the selectmen about putting it on the website?
Thank you, yes. And that made it in the back to variance. Under the variance section 18056, the chair of the Board of Selectmen suggested that when we talk about posting in a local newspaper of general circulation, we also post with the town clerk and on the town website. So we've added that language into this version as well. Thanks, Erica.
Okay, can I have a motion to adopt these changes as presented, or we get at least get the motion on the floor, and then we can discuss them?
So moved.
Okay.
We'll have a chance to discuss it after
Absolutely.
that, right?
Right. Okay, now we can discuss it.
I'll second the motion. I'm just going to point out that you have an important typo in 18051 on the second line. Disposal capacity as determined by a discharge permit issued
I saw that. I
by
didn't catch it.
Mass DEP.
Okay, we'll incorporate that into Steve's motion as a
Yes.
change. Any other observations or changes, or Ron?
Yes, thanks, Eric. I'm just wondering why the New Silver Beach area was exempted from this. It's not clear, I'm not sure what the reason was for
John,
that.
can you explain that?
Well,
You thought
I
it was a
think
good idea.
originally when we started, I suggested that we not include it, and then thought better of it. But I think Frank's thinking, although I haven't chatted with him, is that that bylaw set quite a bit of precedent. And it's been used in a number of other places, not only in the state, but in throughout the country, as the first bylaw that lets you limit the number of bedrooms that can be hooked up to a treatment plant. And so I think he just thought for historical reasons that we should keep it together as a package.
He was pretty firm on this, that they ought to be treated separately. I know the net effect is no different, but
Related question, that was going to be one of my questions, phrased slightly differently. There are two aspects to that. One is the sort of the legal aspect, whether it's in a separate place in the laws, but functionally, how many bedrooms does that give the New Silver Beach
it
people?
doesn't change New Silver Beach at all.
So they're staying with 3.
Right.
Should anyone say something about that?
Okay.
Well, I think by leaving it as is, there's no change. They stay at 3 unless they get a variance. Just, there's a variance provision.
What is it currently, say, for Woods Hole and Main Street?
There's nothing for Woods Hole on Main Street.
There's no limit.
There's no bedroom. It's the ability of the treatment plant to accept capacity. And there's some new requirements based on settlement agreement that we can only tie in X amount of new flow.
But at any given time, for instance, right now, you could add 10 bedrooms because clearly you have the capacity for that.
Clearly, you could if you met other zoning and other requirements. The capacity's there. It's other people's determination whether it's acceptable to the town to put that many more bedrooms on one lot. The one thing I had wanted to say was that Frank also thought that since this has been around such a long time, there may be some legal issues that we're not sure about, deed restrictions. It may overly complicate things on town meeting floor because this is not truly needed for the SRF loan. And I guess if town meeting or others wanted to, we could go back and revisit it after getting some experience with Little Pond or depending on what folks say. So that's why we're only amending the new part, because the new part is truly the only part we really have to put forward for SRF purposes.
And to be fair, New Silver has its own treatment plant and its own disposal site that has nothing to do with.
Good point.
I think that's the key point.
Yeah, I was just trying to...
It's a separate system, and it was sized specifically for the number of houses that were in New Silver Beach. And
I just was thinking of resistance on town meeting floor if somebody perceives
Right.
some kind of unfairness.
whereas this applies to the sewered areas that go to Blacksmith Shop Road.
And my other question was, in the title, present and future, I don't mind it, but clearly no one proposes regulating past sewer service areas that don't exist anymore. Why did he do that?
I don't know.
If we ever sewered beyond Little Pond, but by the same token...
That's future.
That would be future.
Yeah.
It's the past one.
But it doesn't say past.
No, that's the one that's...
Well, I guess present encompasses the current system.
Present.
It's all. Right?
I mean, there could be a system that is collapsed from 250 years ago. If you want to include that.
Actually, it's a little known fact that under Anvith Avenue, there is a
Yes,
sewer collection.
there is a, that's right.
It doesn't go to anything. It never has, and it never will, but it's there. All right, any other comments or questions on the text?
I just want a point of information. What Jerry just said about the flow neutral bylaw being necessary for this SRF,
Right.
if we used SRF funds for anything else, this flow neutral bylaw would not satisfy. In other words, if
No, it would. We need
Would
in order to apply for zero loans, you have to show that you have a bylaw of this nature on your books.
It does not have to cover this area. For example, let's say that we were taking some other area and using
But we may well be.
Oyster Pond or whatever.
Bourne's Pond.
Yeah, Bourne's Pond or Oyster Pond or whatever.
Yeah.
We're using funds in another area which has nothing to do with sewer. Would we be able to use the SRF funds? for
No,
that
because
purpose
if
with
you,
this fund?
if you use their funds to put in eco-toilets,
Yeah,
then you can have all the population growth you
No, you
want.
well, that's.
Because the new people have to get eco-toilets and it doesn't load up the sewage plant.
Okay, but that, yes, that is, that's the point I think I would like to go on record as saying that I don't think we should have a town where eco-toilets or any other thing other than sewer would simply allow large amounts of growth.
I think the DEP doesn't know, because we asked them specifically about Bourne's Pond, where there's no sewers there, and it still relies on Title V. And they hedged their bet of saying whether we needed to do something. So I think the answer is, if we want their money, at the time we go in, they'll look at it, and they'll want to make sure it's flow neutral. And by flow neutral, they also mean that it contains growth such that the growth wouldn't be greater than the density would be with Title V. So there could be some alternatives that increase density that they may give you a objection to.
But we're not there yet.
And we're not there yet, is
Right.
that the
Right.
point?
Right.
But would we then have to go through another modification of the
Maybe.
flow neutral bylaw at that time?
Well, we'll
Who
see.
knows?
Yeah, this doesn't,
That's-
wouldn't affect, if eco toilets suddenly became the rage and everybody put them in, this wouldn't have anything to do with it.
I just want to go on record saying I think it's too bad.
Okay, well, then we might have to have a bylaw when that time comes,
Right,
I-
that addresses that.
I just want to, it's, the thing is that if we look holistically, this is a little bit sewer-centric in a way, obviously. But the question I have is that if, in the upper watershed area, say, let's say just the upper watershed for Little Pond, there's no, the limitations are based on existing Title V kinds of things, but someone could put in a relatively intensive development with Title V compliance, right? So that is, I don't know how, I'm not sure if there's any, it just came to my mind.
DEP hasn't struggled with this, and they won't until it comes up. We have a watershed that has to meet TMDL. Eventually, somebody's going to say that you have nitrogen management in the sewer shed. And implicit is going to be, if you get that watershed to meet a TMDL, there can be no extra load coming from the Title V systems or the INA system. So what you may see, I say may see, is a restriction of Title V systems in the upper watersheds, depending on how the TMDL is approved for that watershed.
Well, it's not, not
And
before us.
they're
Not
not
for
there
tonight.
yet either.
So
Not before
this,
us tonight.
we have a motion and a second.
We do.
Uh,
Any further amendments are to be made, or shall we fully approve it? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of adopting this as recommended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. For the nationwide television audience, by the way, the premise of this is, if there's going to be a sewered area, which we're talking about around Little Pond, you don't want an explosion of growth because you've suddenly put in a sewer. You don't want people putting in 6-story apartment buildings because they can now. So what this does is try to keep the development in that area at the water usage in the same level it essentially is now. We can do that, and we can still allow everybody in that area to have up to 4 bedrooms, and still be within the quantity of water that's used now and the quantity of water that would be going to the treatment plant that the treatment plant can take. So it's a win for the people in that area. They get more bedrooms, many of them, most of them get more bedrooms than they have now by right. And if they feel the need to have more than 4, there is a provision to pursue that in this variance procedure. But it's a clear major benefit for anyone who lives in that area and doesn't have 4 bedrooms now, because most of the folks who don't have 4 now are quite unlikely to be able to get 4 under Title V because their lots are very small. So it's a benefit for those people in that area, but it's a way of controlling growth so the place doesn't explode because sewers were installed. Next thing on the...
We have a question.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Would the people have the same benefit as the 4 bedrooms if they had an eco-toilet installed in their house?
There's another proposed piece of legislation that talks about the eco-toilets, and we're coming to that one.
Oh, okay.
I can get a copy of that.
Okay, well, you can look at mine here. Second one up is special legislation reducing costs to homeowners. Did everybody get a copy of that?
I didn't hand it out, but I sent it out. And
Okay,
said
it was
if you
all
need-
sent around. The only proposed, there were 2 proposed changes. Why don't you lay
Yep.
them out?
So there were 2 proposed changes. In section 1, it originally said, notwithstanding any general or special law to the contrary, the town of Falmouth may assess and collect interest on an unpaid balance of sewer betterment assessments at a rate equal to the net rate of interest. The change is to allow up to 2% of the net rate of interest. And that allows flexibility.
Yeah,
The point.
Ron had some comment on that, but go ahead.
Okay, so that was the first change, and it was to allow either the net rate or up to 2% of it for increased flexibility. That was the first, it was a recommendation that came. And then the second change is the town, in section 2, notwithstanding any general or special law to the contrary, the town of Falmouth may apportion all future sewer assessments. In other words, we didn't want there to be confusion that past betterments and past assessments were in view here because those have been established and those were set. So it was just to clarify that there wasn't an intent to go back.
Right.
So those were the 2.
Ron.
Thanks, Eric. I have a few things. We're coming, first of all, to the section 1. We'll start with that. The first point I'd like to suggest, and this is something we didn't include before, but where it says on the second line, on an unpaid balance of a sewer betterment, or whatever, I think that's what it said. I suggest we change that to wastewater. And the reason I suggest that is due to the option of betterments being possible for upgrading, repairing, or replacing Title V systems. And that law and regulation allows for that. So this would allow, as we look to the future, should there be programs, if the county program became non-existent, which it might, then this could, or if it isn't as beneficial or helpful as this arrangement turns out to be, then people could apply for betterment for those systems as well. And I think that would be a useful thing to add. The second thing on this, and I'll stop before I go to the next, but is that the raise up to 2%, our subgroup worked very hard on thinking about this particular legislation in terms of many aspects. And the reason that we chose the equal to the net rate of interest charges versus any possibility of going up was because we were concerned about lower income households, and that we would try to give everyone basically the best deal we could in terms of the cost of a sewer betterment, taxes, and sewer bill. And so that's why it was very difficult to find other ways to try and minimize that or try to get a kind of an egalitarian approach. There's a lot of complexities to that. So that was the reason we wanted it to be equal to the net rate. And in 2006, Mattapoisett.
The net rate is what the state is charging us?
Yes,
No,
it's just the online.
That's not the net rate, excuse me.
Sorry. Well, what it is that what we intended was that the interest rate, if the town got 0% interest, or 2%, whatever it got, that would be the rate that would be transferred to the homeowner or the business owner. So as to try and keep it, because we started to think about aspects of, well, you know, we looked at different costs or values of homes, and we looked at how that would all work out in terms of meeting, for example, the total cost, and how maybe higher valued houses would pay more. It got very complicated because of the future. You can't predict the future. A little house now may end up being a very big development. So the notion to this was to try and give the best possible and fairest a charge to all households. And if we were to add 2% or whatever happened in the future, that would compromise that effort that we put in. So those were the two things. One was the wastewater, and the second was the
Let me give a little background here. The current state law is that the towns have a choice of charging 5% interest or 2% above the rate that they're paying on what they borrow. So
right.
If they're paying, it could be 5. If you had a 0% loan, it could be 2. If you had a 2% loan, it could be 4. This would give the town one more choice, which would be, in Ron's version, 0, or in your version, 0 to 2.
Did I speak to that? First of all, in New Silver Beach, that came up. And it was this decision of town management at that point in time that they charged the New Silver Beach owners the net interest rate of borrowing money up to the loan. So the town has expended money to get to the loan, so that it's not, in that case, the decision was made, it wasn't going to be 2%, it was 2.15%. I think, to speak to the future, I think all this does is give to the decision makers, not us, the decision makers, the flexibility. If times are good, we don't have to go to the 2%. We may go 1%. I think this gives the maximum flexibility to the Board of Selectmen and town meeting at the time we want to do it. When I did a quick calculation, I assumed $10,000, I just assumed 50%. I spread it out over 20 years and over 30 years. The net difference was about $30 a month. Not that that's insignificant. I mean, but it gets into the range of we're not hurting low income. The selectmen can always come up with special funds for low income if we can ever define it. And the property values of the houses have nothing to do with this. It is.
Yeah, but your most important point is that up to 2 includes 0.
Right.
So they still have the 0 option.
Yes.
But that's already in the state law, right?
No,
The 0 option, no. The 0 option is new.
So
It would be +2 or
Right.
+5.
2 above what you're borrowing is.
I know, but I'm still thinking that it you know, we have 3 components to the sewer costs. One is the capital investment cost, which is the design, engineering, construction, and we have the sewer bill, the operating cost for the sewer system. And so it's in the operating costs then. If there's something is needed, it could be spread out through that or through the tax base or whatever could be done in the future. So I think that my feeling was that it would be good just to have that on lending rate to create the greatest fairness in town. So.
Your other point, I think, is not going to fly. The moderator will tell you that you'd be expanding beyond the scope of the article because the article is already in the warrant,
Right.
which references the sewer betterment.
I know we can change that.
It's in the warrant. It's done.
The bylaw that we're amending, I mean, the betterment bylaws say sewer. Terms change. I don't think
but
the difference between wastewater and sewer.
Well, understood, but he's talking about alternative.
What I'm saying
Okay.
is that there's another
That's a good
betterment
point.
for wastewater. Yeah.
So thanks for not blowing it up.
I didn't mean to blow it up. I was just hadn't thought of it.
I mean, I support the 2%. I just think it gives us more flexibility. We're still saying we can do 0, but it lets the town, if they need to, recover the costs of administrating betterments.
Okay. So
Well,
if
it does
his
seem
amendment,
to
if his
me-
amendment worked, they could do 0, they could do 1, they
Or-
could do 2.
Or 1.25. But it shouldn't say up to 2% of the net rate. It should say up to 2% above
Right.
Yes.
the 2%. Because you're,
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right,
Above the net
Above.
rate.
okay.
2% of would mean. if the
Yeah,
number is
yeah, it'd be
5,
very small.
Right,
the net rate is 0, 2% above that.
right.
2%.
Zero.
Okay, let's get a motion on the floor here.
Well, I
So-
finished the second.
Oh, okay, keep going, sorry.
Okay, well, the second one is similar. It's where it had said was changed to future sewer. I had I thought about changing that as well in the same, following state law basically, and having it read all pertinent wastewater assessments, and that would include the betterments in Chapter 111, Section 127B and 1/2. Which allows for the upgrade, repair, or replacement of a septic system. And that gives more flexibility. We're talking about flexibility now. This gives more flexibility as we move into the future. And there may be situations where those IA systems, whichever systems, could be eligible for betterments.
I think you're gonna run into what I just pointed out there, that it's beyond the scope of the print article as printed.
But so is the 2% as printed.
No, in that one, I think you're talking about a rate, and you're offering a different rate, but it's not, you're still talking about rates. In this case, you're talking about sewers, and now you're talking about something completely different.
May I ask Ron a question, please?
Sure.
Ron, did you say that the state law has a statement saying all pertinent?
No, what I'm saying is that there's a state law that says that betterments can be applied to septic systems. Upgrade, repair, replacement, either with eco toilets or with just fixing them up, putting an IA system in. There is a possibility. So if we're talking about betterments, then we should look at the full scope of wastewater.
Well, betterments, you could do water betterments, you could do road betterments, there's any number of things that can be betterments.
I have it in front of me.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
that there's also, because the warrant has been printed, you're really bound by the title of this, and it's an act regulating sewer service area betterment assessments in the town of Falmouth. And what you're trying to bring in here is betterments that would apply to IA systems, which are not necessarily in the sewer service area, or septic repairs and so on. So I really think that Eric is giving you good advice, that it will be seen as being outside the scope of the article as printed.
You'd have to bring it to the floor of the town meeting and make it.
Well, if it's out of order. It's out of order. Not to say that in the future, trying to give breaks on betterments for other types of betterments isn't an admirable goal, but I don't think it can be accomplished with this particular article that we've got here now.
But
The state law doesn't reference.
Look, can this be amended? Yes or no? Can it be amended on town meeting floor? Any language.
If it's ruled beyond, if an amendment such as
Or
you're
a
proposing is
motion.
beyond the
A
scope
motion,
of the
yeah.
article, that's the end of it.
Right.
But it's not beyond the scope. We're talking about
Yeah,
wastewater.
it is beyond the scope.
Well, it's going to be the moderator's call. I mean, anybody can stand up and say, I want to amend X, but it will be the moderator's call as to whether it is beyond the scope of the article.
Let's get a motion on the floor.
Okay, well, I think because there's so much discussion, I think we should take it one section at a time.
Okay, well, let's get the first section.
Okay, so I'm going to move that Section 1 be amended to read, notwithstanding any general or special law to the contrary, the town of Falmouth may assess and collect interest on an unpaid balance of a sewer betterment assessment at a rate up to 2% above the net rate of interest chargeable to the town for the project to which the assessment relates.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, discussion.
The only change there was the grammar error, right?
No.
2% above.
Up
no.
to 2%.
Up to 2% above the
yeah.
net rate of interest that's being charged to the town.
And Ron would like to keep it the way it is for,
No, yeah, I would like to keep, well, not exactly. I'd like to have the wastewater thing put in there instead of the sewer, but.
Right.
But, okay, but I appreciate that. I think that, but one thing to be very clear about here is that we are not asking for something that's way out of line. In 2006, Mattapoisett had a special act that had the original language equal to the net rate.
Equal to.
That's right.
Right.
It was exactly that. This is not something that we're asking to try and help our community to the degree we can beyond what even there's precedent for.
okay. So you would further amend her motion to let it read the way it is now?
Well, you should call the vote on this motion. If it passes,
It's been
okay,
seconded,
or
it's
if
on
it
the floor.
fails,
Right,
then.
right.
If you don't mind, I can.
Okay, I understand. Sorry.
If it passes, then we can take Ron's.
Another amendment.
Oh. The normal process would be the other way around.
Well,
Which is,
Well, the thing is, there's a motion on the floor, so that's,
okay,
we have to deal with that, I
motion, and
think.
you have not offered a further motion, so we have the one.
No, I had a discussion
Okay,
point on that
okay,
motion.
let's hear it.
Right. I just said, well,
Okay,
oh, you want
okay.
my further motion?
No, you in discussion, are we all done with the discussion piece?
Yeah, I discussed, I said that I'd
Yeah.
like sewer changed to wastewater, and I would like the original equal to retained. That was my discussion point.
All right, okay, her motion's on the floor. Any further discussion on her motion?
I have a suggestion that we, in interest of following up on Ron's point, that we separate the sewer question and the 2% rate and have a substitute motion voted on for this, to have the language returned to its original only, and to get a vote on that.
Your chair was attempting to have that occur,
Okay.
but it didn't. So the only motion before us is the one that Virginia presented. All in favor of Virginia's motion? Everybody remember what it said? It didn't do anything about septic tanks and...
Didn't say anything about wastewater.
All it did was up to 2% instead of...
Up to 2% above.
Okay, everyone heard that one? Everyone ready to vote on it? Okay, all in favor of Virginia's motion, raise your hand.
aye.
Opposed?
Well, I'll abstain.
You abstain?
Okay, I'm opposed. Okay, I'm opposed. Okay. I'm opposed. No.
I was voting with you.
No, it's okay. I was going to be,
But
you know,
it
kind of
doesn't
like
matter.
whatever, but
It's still
I
for.
just think it's,
All right, that one's done. Any other amendments to be offered on section 1?
Oh, I can, well, I would like to amend that.
Do it.
Well, no, it's fine. We have, no one's going to second my motions. I don't, well, maybe someone will.
Try and see.
Okay, I'll try and see.
Separate your motion.
Okay, I would like it to read, basically, two things. Well, before section 1, we'd have to change the sewer service area to wastewater betterment assessments in the title. And then we'd have to replace sewer with wastewater in the betterment assessment in section 1, which is wastewater betterment assessment instead of sewer, at a rate equal to the net rate.
Okay, is
So
there a second?
that's what's read.
No second, you're right.
Okay. That's right.
Okay,
Well,
section 2. The word future is the only change in section 2 that's so far been offered. No motion on that? Okay, somebody should move that. Or do we care about future?
I believe it was put in for clarification by the selectmen and town council. Is that-
Can you read the context of it? I didn't print that one out.
Town council was the future.
Town council is the one that put in future. Okay. Notwithstanding any general or special law to the contrary, town of Falmouth may apportion all future sewer assessments or unpaid balances
Yes.
over a period not to exceed 30 years.
I move that.
Thank you. Second? I'll second. Okay, discussion? All in favor?
wait a minute,
Aye.
no, I have a discussion
Oh,
point.
sorry.
I accept, I think the word future is good to have in there. Okay. Very good. I think that's a good addition. I think the sewer assessment thing, although it would be very confusing now, considering the first
I have his
section, but I would still have liked to see future wastewater assessments rather than future sewer assessments. But since the first thing has now been voted not to include wastewater, I see the dilemma.
Okay. I don't think there's any further action to be taken on this one. Am I right? Okay, good.
Can we vote on that?
Yes.
The rest of it?
I think, yeah, now that we've done all these sections and you dealt with them, we'll deal with the thing as a whole.
I have another discussion point on this section. Is it okay? Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, no, it was Selectman Murphy asked about the 30-year period, right?
Right.
And he said, his question was, well, if you have a 30-year payback period and the SRF loans are only bonded for 20 years, how do we reconcile that? And
I asked Jennifer Pettit that very question
oh, good.
today.
Okay.
And her answer was, if the legislature passes special legislation to let you do it, you can do it.
Then we do it. Okay.
But analogous to the problem with, well, no, not quite analogous. If putting that in there risks the legislature killing the whole thing, or are they going to benevolently adjust it down to 20 if that will get it passed? In other words, suppose they could pass it with 20 but not with 30.
If the town meeting in Falmouth sends it to the legislature, they don't get to mess with it. They vote it up or down.
Right.
Or they ignore it, but they don't rewrite it. The town of Falmouth gets to ask for it, and the town of Falmouth...
And other communities have asked for 30 years.
So you answered part of my question, or to make it easier to state it now. If they shoot it down because it says 30, but, I mean, suppose that if someone researched, you'd find out that they would shoot it down if it said 30, but they wouldn't shoot it down. If it said 20,
The research that's
then we're
been
risking
by
it.
Ron over here has uncovered...
Yeah,
that
there is a
30.
precedent, a special legislation, I forgot
30.
what town it was, Richmond or
More than
somewhere.
one. There you go.
Yeah, more than one, where they had 30 years.
Oh, okay.
This
It's been
isn't,
done.
we're not
Okay,
everything that was put down here has had precedence, both in terms of section 1 and
Great.
section 2.
Right, and I want to publicly commend Ron for the research on it. He went back 10 years and found every special act that had been done in this field for any town. And frankly, every piece of language in here came from an act they had already passed.
Right, and it was interesting, in 2006, just as a point, all of these things went through. It was that year that the questions that we're looking at, it turns out in that 1 year, that was when I mean, there are many special acts regarding wastewater or sewers, and that this was, but the ones that we were interested in were from 2006.
All right, so can we have a motion to adopt this as amended now?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
I had it.
slow down.
I want to go on record as saying that I agree with Ron that it should not simply be sewer service area, that we have two consequences by doing it the way we're doing it. One consequence is that if we do, as a matter of fact, have betterments for other things, we're going to have to go back and change it again.
It'll be a different special
It'll be a
act.
different special act.
Right.
And that's always difficult to do. It would be good if we could get one single special act that would do it.
Yep.
So that's one consequence. The second consequence is one that we are reinforcing, I think, the concern that a lot of people have that we're really only concerned with sewer. We're reinforcing that.
If any of them listened to you, they wouldn't think that.
They wouldn't think that, that's correct, if they listen to me.
Or if they read the Enterprise.
Right, or if they read anything that we do.
But I think this...
To be fair, these special acts are related to sewering, and their goal is to reduce the cost of it to the homeowners and to reduce the cost of it to the town. And the fact that it doesn't include shellfish or other things in this particular piece doesn't mean we don't care about shellfish or other things. It just means that this particular piece is about this. And I think most people can see that.
You already pointed out that, you in Virginia, that you probably can't put that in because of being in the warrant and that being a substantial change. But that Ron could stand up and suggest an amendment. Suppose, and he might get shot down, but suppose he was not shot down by the moderator, but the moderator, whoever, then turned to the Water Quality Committee in its official capacity and said, do you support this amendment?
This is not the way it works.
No.
Can I have a question?
The moderator judges the appropriateness of any amendment by the standard of, is it
Yeah,
within
no,
the
but
scope or
suppose,
beyond? If he decides it's within or beyond, he doesn't care what we think.
no,
He
no.
doesn't care what anybody thinks.
Yeah,
He's reading the
Right,
the
suppose
article,
he
he's reading the law.
decides that it is within the scope.
Well, then
But then there's still the question of the town meeting members, does the committee as a whole agree with this, or is this just Ron's crazy idea?
Town meeting has to agree
We
with
do
it.
not know what will happen. We're not going to spend.
It's a lot.
I understand, I agree with it.
I can interpret that the other.
Any time tonight trying to figure out what town meeting might do in that instance. We just can't.
One thing to help Ron. Ron said the betterment law says septic. It doesn't. It says sewer. Look in.
Here, read this, Jerry.
Okay.
This is the law.
Okay.
I've read it.
No, you haven't read it.
You're out of order. We're moving on.
Pardon me.
Special
Wait,
legislation,
did we
echo
vote?
toilet
We didn't
connection
vote on the
exemption.
second motion.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm still waiting for that last motion. Okay. Will somebody give me a motion to adopt these amendments that we've adopted?
So moved.
Done it.
That's done. We haven't
It's been
voted
done.
yet.
Comment?
I had a comment.
Okay, comment period is over. Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Thank you. Third item, special legislation, echo toilet connection exemption. This is for all the people who think we're spending a long time on sewers.
I didn't get a copy of, were there any changes to be made?
None.
Okay,
None.
fine. So I didn't get a copy of it.
So unless people have any changes, we'll just pass it on the way it was.
Right.
Good.
Okay.
Done.
You have to vote to approve it, right?
Well,
The committee has already approved it. We didn't make
Okay.
any changes. It
It's
allowed,
going the way.
We haven't voted yet.
Okay.
Okay, ecologic report on phosphorus absorption, McBride memo and response. Everyone received in their email the ecologic report on phosphorus adsorption. And the McBride memo and response was also sent out. Everyone has that. Any, it's not something we have to,
And the McBride rebuttal.
right, there's a rebuttal. So, we don't have to vote on it, but I guess we can discuss it here.
Oh,
Okay.
thanks. Eric, are you
Well,
recognizing? me? Okay,
should
yeah.
Celia kind of give the lay of the
Yeah,
land?
that'd be good,
and then
yeah,
you can
okay.
give-
okay.
Yeah, I think
Let
that'd
me-
be good, yeah, okay.
So, Ecologic did a report looking at the adsorption of phosphorus in the soils after Site 7 going towards Crocker Pond. And they originally found that the soil adsorption capacity with no additional treatment at the wastewater treatment facility is 105 years. The Dr. McBride from Cornell had some comments about her methodology and her findings, and had brought up a number of uncertainties that she has now responded to point by point. And I would say that her response to comments substantiates that she feels that she can academically and scientifically and environmentally substantiate her claims. And I think there are two areas where she does this. She does this by showing her understanding of soil mineralogy. The absorption capacity has to do with the volume and not just the concentration of aluminum and iron. She made the corrections that basically increased the aluminum concentration in the tables. Those were apparently transposition errors, so she corrected the transposition errors. And the other point that she makes is that from the Ashumet Pond study that was done, that her modeling that she did on the phosphorus and the amount of the soil volumes are substantiated by what I would call field data from Ashumet Pond that show that a wastewater plume, and let me parenthetically say, she also goes into great detail about why she believes that phosphorus, that the pH is actually acidic and would stay acidic. I mean, she spends 3 paragraphs describing and explaining and substantiating why she feels that assuming an acidic situation is reasonable. Then she, in her last paragraph, brings in the Ashumet Pond information and says that the Ashumet Pond study shows that a wastewater plume of phosphorus that was at Mass Military Reservation, traveling the same distance minus 100 feet, so a comparable distance, with 3 times the concentration, took 30 years to reach a Shumat pond. So her analysis was first modeling, and then she looks at the field data and says it substantiates the 100-year claim for adsorption. So I think where we're at is she's looked at the comments that made by McBride, and she's standing by her report, and she brings in field data to back up her modeling claims. And I think the sort of other 2 points that I would add about the phosphorus question in Crocker Pond is that we've looked at monitoring well data from our own wastewater treatment facility. Amy Lola's looked at it, and I've looked at it, and we have monitoring wells upstream of the wastewater treatment facility and downstream of the wastewater treatment facility. And the phosphorus concentration in the upstream wells tracks directly the downstream wells. That is to say that there is no difference in the phosphorus concentration upstream of the wastewater treatment facility and downstream about 1,700 feet for 30 years. So we have not had phosphorus desorption for 30 years in a real field experiment with our real effluent and our real soils. So there's that piece of information. And I know that John Waterbury has looked at this information in detail and may want to add to that. And I think the last thing I would say is that the plan is to put monitoring wells in. The plan is to put right below Site 7 monitoring wells, not 1,000 feet, not 2,000 feet, but 100 feet or closer, so that if there is a desorption event or a breakthrough event, it'll be detected within a very short period of time. And at that point, there are a variety of options. Some are more expensive than others, and some are not very expensive at all, to further reduce the concentration of phosphorus coming out of the wastewater treatment facility. So, I think there's a reasonable body of evidence that the amount of that phosphorus is not going to be a problem.
Counterpoint?
Yeah, thanks, Ia. That was a very nice defense of Ecologic's viewpoint. It was well stated and comprehensive. But there are a couple things. There are several things. I sent the responses to Dr. McBride, who is he's a professor at Cornell in the Soil and Plant Sciences Department. And he looked at what they said and reviewed it. And if you looked at what he wrote in his response, a number of the factors that Ecologic used were outdated in terms of current understanding of soils and phosphorus adsorption. And that they based it on an earlier research by someone by the name of Schumann, who later basically changed his view and cautioned in a recent publication that modeling of pea in soils is important to determine what's called the adsorption isotherm, which is basically what type of materials are in the soil. And we don't know what those materials are. There are 2 types that have aluminum in them, and the focus here is on aluminum, feldspar or gibbsite. And and if it's gibbsite, it would have good adsorption capacity, but that if it's feldspar, it would not. So this is a fundamental factor in their report, a fundamental assumption that they have made. He also said they haven't adequately looked at the other cations in the waste stream, sulfates and others, in terms of competing and actually also, basically supplanting phosphate uptake or phosphate adsorption. So these are some of the issues in this. So that he's still very concerned and sees there's high uncertainty and high risk with using this site. Another important factor that isn't mentioned in the ecologic report is that in the case of Crocker Pond versus a Shumat Pond, we know from the particle flow diagrams that 42% of the discharged effluent will go through Crocker Pond. There's no indication in a Shumat Pond. Is it 1%? Is it 2%? We don't know how much is going into a Shumat Pond from the plant. The other point on the, we don't know from MMR how much of the wastewater is traveling through a Shumat Pond. We know that with, I haven't seen it in her report, it's not there.
It's in the Shumat study, and it's, I believe, 100%.
100% of the effluent, well, that
Went
would be
through-
extra-
if
well,
you look
anyway,
at the
it's not-
monitoring wells
All I'm
in the
saying, I'm
report.
looking at her report and her response, it's not there. And then one other point is that, in looking at the wells, I mean, in looking at the data of the wells and trying to sort out what's going on, it's quite extraordinary that there's no change from upstream of their current wastewater treatment plant and downstream. There should be some indication, and there is phosphorus in all the wells, except for one, the way they couldn't read it, but it's in there. That raises into question about the wells themselves. Are they actually in the, I don't know, I haven't seen the reports, but are they actually in the plume? Are they outside the plume? Are they below the plume, above it, whatever it may be? Are they leaky? Could it be that rainwater seeps in and other things seep in and dilute them? I don't know how this because to get information from the wastewater department isn't always that easy. Sometimes
I take
you have
exception to that.
Sometimes you have to file a Freedom of Information Act.
Point of order,
request.
Mr. Chairman.
And we are getting out
But
of hand
anyway,
here.
all I'm saying is that
We're not going to cast aspersions on
no,
the
I know.
wastewater
I'm
department
not
unless you have
right.
something
But what
specific.
I'm trying to say is that the report, and we're looking at some of this critique is from a very senior scientist who's been around the block. He's seen so many things. He's totally up on the literature, the more current literature than the consultant was in terms of what he reported. So it is. I think there is a concern here. I mean, I don't think we can just go ahead without doing further. He makes a simple suggestion, which is that actually we should look at the absorption capacity of the soil. Of course, I don't know how you would. I don't know how homogeneous the soil is that the plume goes through. But it seems to me that if we're going to do due diligence on this, and we have this totally independent assessment of this report and this response, and he mentions that there are some serious flaws in the consultant's report. So it's or some assumptions that are not quite up to par.
Good point.
I think,
Yeah, Steve has actually had something first.
and John.
I agree with Sia, but I would have said it slightly differently. The lady at Ecologic really nailed it. It was thorough, it was theoretical and empirical, and we have the practical backup measurements that Sia mentioned, and the practical backup that Sia mentioned and that Virginia mentioned some time ago. And the final rebuttal by McBride, again, this isn't my field. If you really wanted to get to solve the he said, she said aspect of this, you'd have to have 5 other people and then look at what the majority said, some sort of review board, which is probably beyond the scope of us. But I have read a lot of scientific arguments over the years, and his final rebuttal is just weak, and it smacks of a face-saving thing of that he couldn't just give up. But well, there's this little theoretical point. Don't forget that. But it just is inconsequential compared to her more thorough argument.
Okay. John.
I would simply appeal to the good common horse sense of New Englanders. We have done this experiment for 30 years. We have monitoring wells, both upgrading and downgrading of our infiltration beds. If you look at that data set, you do not see any difference between the phosphorus numbers. above and below the gradients. We've had no breakout. I just think common sense says we've got this thing nailed. Let's move on. I don't think we need to fuss around with this anymore.
Right, one more thing, if I may.
Sure.
From a cost point of view, how much would it cost to go through the process of doing exactly what you were suggesting, getting a large number of people to it would cost a good deal, and doing all the testing. And how much would it cost if, as a matter of fact, 5, 10, 15 years from now, it turns out we have to have a phosphorus problem, how much would it cost to deal with it at that time? It seems to me that some assessment of that would tell you whether it's worthwhile doing.
Well, but the point is, you'd have to do it anyway. If they say now, it's just when you'd put in the extra phosphorus treatment.
Yeah.
If these 5 experts came back at great cost and said, yep, McBride is right, then you put the phosphorus thing in now.
Don't need to.
We're taking a risk and saying, well, we'll put it in 10 years from now, if we have to. And probably we'll never have to.
Yeah, I'm saying it's a matter of cost. It's an economic matter. We don't do it if it's a relatively minor. We would do it if it was relatively minor cost to make a decision. But if it costs a lot of money and time to do it, it's not worth doing if 10 years, 15 years from now we have to make Virginia change.
It isn't going to be 10 years or 15 years from now. You will know within a year or two whether there is a problem, because the monitoring wells downstream of the sand filter beds will or show phosphorus or they will not. Based on all of the information that I have read, all of the scientists that I have spoken to, the soils we have here are uniform. There is adsorption. Phosphorus is not a problem. And monitoring wells downstream of the sand filter beds will be your safety net. You'll know the groundwater travels at a foot per day. You'll know within a year if this problem really exists. You have modelers here. I kind of agree with Steve that he is a soil scientist, but he speaks theoretically, and he's objecting to the theory that was developed by Ecologic. But we have actual data, and we will be having more data. We have a safety net, and I think we really should move on.
I'm saying that, basically.
And the other factor is that we do have, from GHD, a price tag for, if you had to install something to reduce phosphorus, we know what it is and we know how much it would cost. So it's not like, this is not been looked at, we actually got to that point too. So given that, I think we've probably dealt with the McBride memo in response sufficiently.
I just have one more. No, I just have one more point.
Okay.
If I can. Look, the experience we have, horse sense. Good New England Yankee horse sense. We've had a Shumat Pond has been impacted. We know that. Okay, that's happened. We have what was the fellow's name who was just from the Wright Pierce report says that phosphorus is a serious issue, or something that needs to be seriously considered for Oyster Pond. We just heard it an hour ago. The same basic point of how important it is to look at this. And I think that if we look at something and say, well, it's a factor there. So I don't know. All the experience shows that there impacts the freshwater ponds with wastewater effluents in this area, and the concern from Wright Pierce.
Sure, and then Hillary.
One comment about eschewment. That predates when we used phosphorus detergents. We were pouring phosphorus into that system. We've moved on. We don't have phosphorus detergents anymore. It's a very different ballgame.
How much would it cost to have the phosphorus captured?
I don't have it.
You said you had looked into it and you had a number.
I don't have it in my hand.
We'll release that report soon. I think we're just looking at the draft report.
Yeah,
See, it's just, we have to, it's going to be released as a draft. I forget what it was.
I can't remember either.
Yeah.
You had a number, but I don't remember.
Well, you don't remember because you didn't know what it was, but I don't remember because
I don't remember the number.
It's there.
But there will be a number.
And that's physical treatment. If you got into wetlands and other things, it might be it might be lower. We just wanted to come up with a ballpark number.
So when would you have that?
I think it'll probably be releasable next week, the end of this week. Yeah.
I don't know,
If I may, I think I just want to just circle back to the point that there is phosphorus coming out of the wastewater treatment facility, and there is 70 feet to groundwater. There are 1 million kilograms of soil, or some enormous amount of soil. I mean, if you think about it, it's 1,800 feet and it goes down 70 feet. The soil prism is huge. It's a huge filter in and of itself. So the point is, with a Schumett, there was also a large volume of soil, and it took 3 times the concentration to reach in 30 years, which is why the 105 years before phosphorus gets to Crocker Pond is the planning number that Ecologic came to. 100 years, 105 years. That's the number. It's what is being planned with.
I want to pick up on Ron's comment about phosphorus. Phosphorus is always a factor to be evaluated in any kind of discharge. And so I think that the fact that Wright Pierce was talking about it is totally appropriate. The fact that it's being looked at for Site 7 is totally appropriate. That does not then make it into some sort of showstopper. The 100 years is a planning number. We're obviously not going to let that happen. That's why you have the monitoring wells downstream. And it gives you ample time to decide a variety of treatments that could be used if phosphorus turns out to be a problem.
I think we are ready to move on to item number 4.
May I stop just for, because of my situation this evening that I must leave by 10 o'clock.
Oh, well, then we should move on to.
I would like to ask whether we could take 5
Absolutely.
minutes.
Let's move on to item 5.
And
Yes, no, sorry.
my daughter has to be picked up at the ferry at 10:15, or she will be alone there, and I don't want her to be alone.
You should be all right. Well, hearing no objection, we'll move on to item 5 and then go back to item 4 after that.
All right.
This is the report on the demonstration project future scenario modeling that Wynn has been working on and has sent around copies and handed around copies.
Right.
So,
Thanks for doing that, Wynn. That's
Okay.
great.
I hope I've not given people more information than they wanted to have this evening. I had lots more I could have given you, but I restrained myself.
Thank you.
And I also don't want to take an inordinate amount of time this evening trying to explain everything that I'm doing. What I would like to try to do this evening is to explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. I am doing this. This is something that I have done. I want to explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it now, why I think it is important, and get a sense of the committee's feeling about 2 things. First of all, am I telling people things they know already? Number 1. In other words, is this something that everybody knows that I just think that maybe not everybody knows? And number 2, does the committee agree with me, after consideration, that this is something that is worthwhile continuing to pursue in light of what's going to be happening in the next few months? And I was very glad to see Ed Leonard come this evening, because he says within the next 6 months they are going to do an analysis very similar to the kind of thing which I'm looking at here. They're going to look at a scenario which contains probably more than one scenario, which covers several watersheds, which covers several sub-watersheds, more than one sub-watershed, and several different alternative technologies for mitigating nitrogen and mitigating whatever else they mitigate. And they're going to be looking at it in the same sense that I think that we will be looking at all of our watersheds and sub-watersheds in the next few years as we go forward in the planning. So I was glad to have him come there, because it's a wonderful, within 6 months we will, I think, see exactly the kind of thing he's doing. It's also, I think, the same kind of in theoretical framework. It's the same kind of thing which the Cape Cod Commission seems to be putting forward as their idea of what we ought to be doing in the future. For example, in the watersheds like Woodgrain Bay and Pompanesset Bay, which cover more than one. They're going to try to help us to think through how we do scenarios and sub-watersheds within that area in the same sort of framework which I'm putting forward. So within the next 6 months, we're going to hear a lot more about this. And I think that I wanted to know, as I go forward and try to understand what the Cape Cod Commission is going to be doing, and the Cape Cod Commission model, I wanted to understand their model. And I wanted to have enough, I wanted to have thought about it enough so I'd be able to assess whether their model is going to serve our purposes without any change. I think it's going to be very useful. I had an exchange with Jerry asked me some very useful, pointed questions about this, and I was able to pin down that. I think that the Cape Cod Commission model that they're developing is going to be a very useful model, but I'm not sure it's going to be complete in every way. It's not going to satisfy all of our needs. And maybe, possibly, we can make some contributions to it. We are, as a matter of fact, going to make contributions to that model in terms of the data we are developing for individual technologies. We know that they're going to use those data as the data in their model. But I don't know how they're going to use them. And I suspect that it may be somewhat more simple than the framework which I think ought to be used for those data. So I'm just trying to get it clear in my own mind and to present to you my thinking about what the problem is when you want to do scenario analysis. That's what I'm trying to do. And I'll just run through what I've done so far and what I was planning as the next steps. I have done one module, which is contained in that second thing, scenarios text, entitled Scenarios Text Eco-Toilet Cost Notes. I've created a framework. I haven't included the spreadsheet because I didn't think it was appropriate to try to bring that and show it to you this evening. But I've created a spreadsheet based upon the principles which I've stated in this 6-page note, which would allow us to calculate the cost. If we have the cost of the individual components, which would allow us to calculate the cost of any number of different iterations or types of eco-toilet installations, and we could do it either we could look at individual types of eco-toilets. We can also look at eco-toilets if they were used for, let's say, a certain number of houses in a watershed. We could get the costs involved in doing that and do them and do those costs over time, taking into account what we believe to be the proper eco-toilet costs. And the model is not complete yet. The spreadsheet works, but it does not have everything in it. Nor am I saying anything about, or claiming anything about the numbers which I put here for installed cost and unit price on page 5 and 6.
Oh, so
These
that's
are chosen.
That's just a plugged number.
These are plugged numbers. They have nothing to do. They do have to do with what I know about eco-toilets a little bit.
Okay.
But they aren't numbers which come out of our eco-toilet program.
Okay.
We're still waiting for those. I hope SIA has some for me in a while. But what I'm trying to do is get some framework into which we can plug numbers. And it's not a complete framework yet, I don't think. I think there's some things left out of it. I also think this, as I look at this further, as I explore building the model, things occur to me which are important to include, which are not included. So it's not a complete picture, and I don't want to pretend it is. So that's that. That's one thing I've done. Number two, and I have a sheet here, scenario for nitrogen reduction calculations in an estuary, 5 pages of that. This would be a sort of mock-up of the idea of what you would place before someone who was trying to fill out for a particular estuary, and they had some watershed data, and they wanted to put the data in for the watersheds, and they wanted to put the data in for available technologies, and they wanted to put the data in for different scenarios using those technologies. But they could put all of those data in, and once they put those data in, the model would run, and it would tell them, it would give them a 40-year pattern of the base scenario without any change, plus an alternative scenario, plus a scenario containing, let's say, mostly sewering. And you could have other scenarios as well. You could build as many scenarios as you wanted, as you had room for in your spreadsheet, but I built it for 3. So that's the second piece that I did. The spreadsheet works, but again, neither the numbers that I'm putting in here, nor the exact form of the spreadsheet, nor the exact form of the assumptions is anywhere near final. I don't pretend it's final. So that's the second thing I did. The third thing I did was to create a small, what do I know? Okay. To create a small model for estimating from survey information that you take from individual households the expected initial nitrogen load to a septic system before and after installation of eco-toilet or IA system for comparison with the actual results attained. I did that because there's been some question raised about how much nitrogen actually is put into a septic system based upon occupancy of the house and based upon the time people spend in the house and outside the house, all of those kinds of things. I have not reviewed what I did 6 months ago, and I'm not even going to try to pretend I did that. But it worked at that time. I want to go back over and create for SIA and for the Eco-Toilet project a small questionnaire, which I'll take out and actually use to see whether we get any results out of it. So that's the third thing I did. I worked today and yesterday on the fourth part, which is a conceptual framework for ranking scenarios and all relevant parameters. I have a 5-page paper, which is not, I decided not to give it to you because it really wasn't ready for prime time. But it contains, I chose 3 things. It's a conceptual framework, which I can talk about if we want to, about how it is proper to figure out from information about a scenario that you have, how many local jobs, economic and tax impacts it creates in comparison with another scenario, what kinds of local jobs there would be and so forth. I have some expertise in that. I've done this kind of thing before. So I'm just trying to spell out how you do that and what's involved in trying to do that. Secondly, resource use and recovery capacities is another whole area which both the many people have asked us to take that into account in our models, and also the MEPA and the EIR wants us to do some of that too. So I want to ask the question, if we want to do that, what do we have to take into account? And what kinds of assumptions can we make and so forth? So I'm doing that. And thirdly, greenhouse gas impacts are involved. The resource use and recovery capacities have a lot to do with the greenhouse gas impacts as well. They're connected with it. And so just those 3 things I took, and I'm just worked, it's not ready for prime time, but I'm pretty close to being able to present that piece. There are, when you take those together and you add to that cost data, which we don't have yet on many of the technologies, when you add those in, then you have a tool which you can use to take any watershed, divide it up into its sub-watersheds, take what I believe will be very good information from the Cape Cod Commission on how many houses are in the watershed, how many parcels are there, how much water they use, and all that kind of stuff. Put that into it, make assumptions which we must develop for ourselves, the assumptions we want to use on some kind of basis, about what we're going to assume about all sorts of things like how far away is the watershed from is the sub-watershed, how long it will take the nitrogen to reach the watershed, how much attenuation might there be, whether we want to use the SMAS numbers they've come up with, or whether we want to modify those is a question we could ask. All of those kinds of things. In other words, to define what a watershed looks like, and then to define what all the technologies look like, and to define what the scenarios look like, we could then use this model as a way of doing what-if scenarios. We could do it as a model for defining down and locating what we really want to look at. I'm not saying that what I'm doing is going to be the final word. I'm not saying that I'm going to create all of that myself. I'm hoping that people like Ed Leonard and people like Cape Cod Commission will have very good in-house models that can do all of that for us. But I think we ought to know what it is all about. And we may even want to have some little models of our own to test things out before we go to the big models. So I'd just like to get a feeling of what where you are with respect to what I've been doing, how it strikes you.
Comment?
I think it's good, and I'm glad I listened to the explanation because I didn't quite understand it reading it.
Yeah.
Having said that, I will say that this last one is an adaptive management model. As we go into a watershed,
Yes.
something like this
Yes.
will be used. And as you said, Oyster Pond may be a small enough watershed
Right.
that could be a driver, and maybe we put a little bit more money in to test drive this concept.
Yes.
I think on some of your assumptions here, I think some of them are just that, assumptions, and I'll send you an email on my thoughts where you made certain assumptions, and I don't understand where they came from other than your views, and I might have some other views on that same thing.
Could I speak to that just briefly?
Sure.
Those assumptions came, that part of my discussion came from, as I began to do this, I discovered there were some questions I had about the way in which assumptions were made. And I noticed that we were going to have to make some assumptions. Already, I made some. I'm not sticking with those assumptions.
Fair enough.
I'm not saying that these
Right.
are the assumptions you have to make. What I'm saying is, it's better to have an assumption out there in front of you
Right.
to discuss than have someone have waffling.
Right.
So I presented some assumptions for discussion.
Fair enough.
We're going to have to make those assumptions.
Okay, Ron.
Thanks. Mr. Batamas is always grounding us, which is always a very important thing. And he's
Grounding
often
us.
said, no, he's, he does, no, you do. Oftentimes, you do ground us something, and very well, actually. But one of the things you've always mentioned is that we have to look at the dollar per pound of nitrogen removed, right? I mean, I think that that's like one of the critical things that but what you've added to that, I think, is what the net cost per pound of nitrogen removed. In other words, like with the resource recovery, it would offset. So if there's a cost to remove it, there'd be some income or some benefit to offset, so that would reduce it. So I think that is something that isn't just focused on, say, nitrogen removal. It's also focused on what benefits can come from that. So I think that's a very good dimension, but we have to keep kind of working from the dollar per pound of nitrogen as an element there. And in that regard, when you talk about greenhouse gas emissions and things like this, the hard thing is going to be, although I think that there's going to be soon, or people working on a kind of a carbon budget or a carbon cost or a cost for carbon. So when those things start coming out and there are dollars for that, then we can really even factor that into his dollar per pound
That was Eric's
idea,
goal.
right? Kind of thing. And the third thing is that I think that you mentioned in point 1A in one of those documents, you talk about that it'll be difficult to determine what oysters do or PRBs or inlet widening and that kind of thing. But that's part of what we're doing, is to value that. So I think that the way you state it there, it seems like saying, well, we'll never be able to get there, kind of thing. It's just the way it's said. It sort of it's like an impediment. But I think that for these other alternatives, even fertilizer control, we can add that into the formula.
That's an excellent example to point out the kinds of things I was coming up with as I thought about it. It's important to keep in mind that when you're when you're asking what kind of credit we're going to get for oysters from SMAST, they have a different situation, a different problem to deal with than they do when you're getting a credit for an eco-toilet, or when they're getting a credit for the wastewater treatment plant, or anything that's on land, which has a sort of linear throughput of nitrogen, where you can measure it here, you can measure it there, and there's not much around. In the estuary, in the estuary, what you're doing, you're measuring a stock concept. You're measuring a specific amount of nitrogen that is in the water at a particular time. But that is being affected by flows which are coming from all directions, from biological flows, all sorts of things. It's very difficult to sort out. I was very glad to see in the report which came in, which we haven't discussed yet today, I was very glad to see them make a statement, by the way, that they were going to give credit to oysters based upon how much the oysters, per number of oysters, are known to take out of the water simply when you grow them. And take them out of the water, you get a certain number of pounds of nitrogen out of the oysters. But they're going to give us credit on the basis of that. They're not going to try to screw around with the question of how we go from the stock concept of how much nitrogen is in the water to how much that means in terms of nitrogen coming into the estuary. They're not going to try to make that connection, apparently. They're going to simply...
No. Well, that's why we have the monitoring program, which is quite expensive, actually. Yeah. The water quality monitoring program will be looking into that as well. I mean, of course, you take the oyster out, and you know how much. Sorry, Eric.
The monitoring.
Yeah. You were looking for input from the other members to your presentation. So
exactly. I'm sorry.
Let's get more of that. Okay.
All right, here are the negative ones.
Okay.
First of all, I can talk to you in detail about this offline, but the stocks versus the flow, I think you got it wrong. I mean, oysters are a flow of nitrogen out.
Yes,
I mean, they're
yes.
no, but you say they're a stock here.
No, I don't say they're a stock.
Well, we'll talk about that later. But the big question is, do you have any data on this sort of approach being used to actually influence an electorate?
There are certain parts of this which do influence an electorate, and they're known to influence an electorate. For example, the jobs. If you can show that something makes more jobs.
And
there are others that don't influence the electorate, but which are required by law that you look at, for example, energy use and so forth, and which could influence the electorate to the extent that they are concerned by such things.
I really think this cannot become a Socratic dialogue tonight.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
We have 8 things on the agenda beyond us. It's the beginning of a conversation, but you wanted input from the members tonight, and not to keep presenting your side.
I'm sorry, yeah.
So any other input from the members?
I'm just going to say, I think you confuse rows and columns on the scenario. You should read that over again. Again, not tonight, but you start with rows and then you switch to columns, and on page 1 and page 2. And so you need to read that and make sure that that's really what you meant to say.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. Okay. Sometimes things are best expressed in terms of one way, and you put it in the model in another way.
I think, for clarity, I think you should do one as A, B, C, D, E, and the other as 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
But you're trying to draw some conclusions, and I think you've got yourself mixed up, so that when you talked about a row, you meant a column, or vice versa.
Oh, you mean when I discuss it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
by all means.
Okay.
By all means.
Other than that, I think that this is incredibly ambitious, and thank you for, because it's obviously a lot of effort.
Well, that's right. The Cape Cod Commission is intending to do something of the sort, and they're getting $3.5 million and hired 20 people to do it.
Well, they've been waiting longer than that.
If you're
apply to them as a consultant.
That's why I'm saying that I don't want to have to continue to produce it, because I think it would take me years to produce a model which would be complete and all that.
Sure.
But I do want to test their model and find out whether there's something could be
I'm glad you bird dogging them and their model, because we need to. Hello.
I went to the technical panel meeting last week at the Cape Cod Commission, and a lot of what you brought up was brought up there.
Yeah.
When they evaluate all the systems, that the co-benefits should be included.
Yeah.
And also like the CO2 contributions. and resource recovery, jobs, all those were mentioned. So that is going to, they're going to try to put that in the spreadsheet.
Okay, any other input from any of the members of the committee?
To be continued.
To be continued.
Okay. What I
Okay.
would like to propose is that I bring back, after looking at examining the Cape Cod Commission model, after talking with Ed Leonard, after talking with, what is it, a couple other people, that maybe 2 months from now, I bring back a report on where we are at that time.
Sounds good.
When you're ready.
Okay.
One, not the ground. There's a limited amount of time you have with Ed Leonard coming out of the oyster pond. So he's very generous with his time.
Okay.
But, keep that in mind.
I'll be careful then.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's a good thought, because he's doing
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can blend
what
it
you're
in.
trying to do here.
Right, exactly. Just
Okay.
get it.
Back to number 4, report on Mass DOT plan for road runoff remediation on Route 28A. And I'm sorry Chris has taken off because it actually is a newsworthy piece.
This is a great piece of news.
Before we jump in here, could I just interject something? Do we need to have some sort of committee closure on the phosphorus discussion?
No, not tonight. I think we've kind of talked
Okay.
about it quite a lot. There was no vote needed to be taken.
Just the discussion.
Right? I mean,
Well,
what do you think?
I would just sort of we can keep discussing this forever. I would think for town meeting, we certainly want a sense of the committee that we have reviewed the phosphorus issues at Site 7, and we're comfortable that they've been dealt with.
Well, you're out, I'd rather not. Frankly, we got a bunch of things to do. We've
Okay.
had a half an hour on this. No vote has been proposed. I think I can appear to see a consensus on this, but I don't want to spend the rest of the night on it. We have a bunch of things we need to do tonight. So we'll come back in 2 weeks if we need to. So let's do it. Let's keep going on this agenda. Report on Mass Department of Transportation.
The committee had sent a letter. We got great information back, thanks to Eric's bird dogging it, and we got a set of plans. And Mass DOT is fundamentally improving the drainage system that currently goes directly into Crocker Pond. They're adding a system that treats 9,300 cubic feet of storm water. They designed it for the first half-inch plus, which is called first flush, which is where the nutrients are for every storm event. So it's large enough to capture all of that. And from there, from the Mass DOT has a BMP matrix that will remove 60 to 70% of the phosphorus coming from the stormwater. So it's a real home run for removing nutrients from Crocker Pond by redesigning and adding. They have deep catch basin pre-treatment. They've got a system that's collecting and settling out and allowing the stormwater to infiltrate. And they've done this through all the proper channels, so it's a great system.
Just a quick question. What was the flow rate that system could manage?
9,300 cubic feet,
9,300
which
cubic
is
feet?
265,000 liters.
265,000 liters?
Yes,
Okay.
per storm event. So that's
Per storm, right.
per storm event. So
Right,
if you
right, right.
imagine, we have about, I know that there are 100 storm events in this region. I tried to go on the USGS website past couple of days to actually get how many of those storm events are over half an inch, but they're not open right now.
Okay. In other words, it's a half an inch times the road area that they're treating, right?
It's catchment area.
Times a
And
half an inch deep.
Yep,
That's the-
and the question would be, there's at least 50 to 75 storm events, probably more like 100 storm events that get you that amount of runoff. So it's kilograms of phosphorus and removal.
Could it work every day, or is it sort of limited in its
Storm
capacity?
events.
No, I know, but if we had, let's say we had a storm event every day, it would be able to manage that?
Yes. Well, you don't have a storm event
I know
every
you
day.
don't, but
It is designed to treat a half inch and infiltrate.
okay. So that's about 65,000 gallons a day, roughly, right? I don't know, whatever.
Yeah,
it
or
is.
per event. I
Whatever,
think
yeah,
that's-
per event. Okay. I was just wondering what the cost would be relative to this other issue over the effluent discharge, and whether something like this could be applied to phosphorus capture if there were an issue with that, because we're doing the same thing with the road runoff and capturing the phosphorus.
Isn't this just a matter of where you're putting it? You're not actually doing anything to it chemically, right?
No, you're not doing anything to it. You're infiltrating
But infiltrating through something that...
through basins into the. And there's some, and they've got a media filter at the bottom of it,
Where do they go? Where does it go after that?
into the ground.
As
Where does it end up?
So
Ends up in the pond.
it ends up in the pond.
Well, it ends up in the groundwater,
It ends up
and
in
it
the-
moves in the direction of the groundwater, which in this case happens to be in the direction of Crocker Pond.
Okay.
And the other thing is there's an annual clean out of the basins. So the phosphorus from stormwater
Uh-huh.
is on particles, fines and coarse. So what this is doing is it's catching it, and the annual clean out actually removes it from the area.
So this could be done with our wastewater effluent, could go through something like that as well.
We could,
Well, no.
It could be done. I don't know how expensive or practical it would be.
I don't know how much this costs to do 65,000 gallons of shot or whatever. Because George Heufelder had mentioned this to me as an option for Site 7.
well, so the idea that you use a media filter
Yeah, right.
to sequester phosphorus,
Yeah.
sure, absolutely.
Right.
But it's just a question of you'd have to scale it, you'd have to design it, you'd have to build it. But I'm just saying that for the purposes of what was a situation where stormwater was going directly into Crocker Pond, the DOT, as part of their Route 28 improvement, is making this improvement, and it's a home run for Crocker Pond.
Correct.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good.
Did they give us a timeline on when it's
November.
November.
They're doing it now.
completed in November?
Yes.
Earl.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good news. Before and after groundwater monitoring of Little Pond project. This is an idea that Virginia had raised, and I thought the whole committee should think about it.
It actually came out of a discussion with the U.S. Geological Survey, because they're looking at seacoast shores, and they've been collecting data in seacoast shores in the peninsula and along the margins of the peninsula and Eel River, and then out in Eel River itself. And it's basically the same philosophy that we've had for all of the demonstration projects that we've been talking about, and that is that we need some before data and some after data. And we don't have anything for Mara Vista or Falmouth Heights that's actually on the land. And so I wanted to sort of put it out for people to think about, that we really ought to know what the concentrations of nitrates are in the peninsula before you install sewers, and then you have fixed points that you can then go back and measure, because if there's going to be an improvement, which there should be, you will see it first in the groundwater before you will actually see it in the estuary. We know that septic systems may have sort of tailing off. It's not just when you stop using the septic system that there's no nitrate in the area that hasn't left. So I had an initial conversation with the Geological Survey some time ago, and then yesterday I met with Dennis LeBlanc, who is working in Seacoast Shores, and he gave me this lovely little picture. This little instrument here is called a geoprobe, and he said that because Mara Vista is very low elevation, I mean it's between 10 and 20 feet above sea level, that it will be relatively inexpensive to install monitoring wells. And he said under 100,000, maybe under 50,000. So that you could have a fairly representative sample, and it would also give you information and insight and comparison to the information they're finding in seacoast shores. So at this point, there's no scope of work, but I sort of wanted to see what the reaction would be from the committee about considering this and using baseline monitoring data to fund it.
It's a no-brainer.
Well, this is not in connection with the permeable reactive barriers. This is in connection with the sewers.
Right.
That's correct.
So what would the exact question you're asking be, and why would you get the answer sooner than monitoring it in the bottom line in the estuary? I mean, you know the sewers are taking it all away.
Well, the sewers are taking away what comes out of the households. They're not
Right.
taking what comes from fertilizers or
Right.
deposition or runoff,
Right.
number one. And number two, there is this question about once you stop using your septic system, how long does it take for anything residual there to bleed out? So all of those things would become evident if you have monitoring wells.
It would depend on the details of exactly where the probes were and how many of them there are.
That's right. And
Whether you overcome objections about variability and
very good.
otherwise you might have this nice graph and
Very good point.
what's it mean?
As I said, there's no scope of work. What we did talk about was, and I'm just nominally using the word 50, along the margin of Mara Vista that goes into Little Pond. And there you're about a foot above the water table, so you can actually push these wells in by hand. And then you would need some along the spine of Mara Vista at the top of the water table, so that you'd have a clear picture of the whole lens, I should say, the whole water regime.
You might want to talk to Kerfoot.
Oh, course.
I think the thing to do is to talk to Dennis Blank.
Well, a whole bunch of different people.
Yes.
Kerfoot had a system that I actually helped him pound them into the ground.
Yep.
When well, I don't need to go into the reason for it, but he puts these plastic tubes down in the ground.
That's right.
Just the tube, and leaves it there. And so they cost pennies, and you put them all over the place.
Yep.
And then you come back and take a syringe and take a sample, and put it in a little bottle, and take it back to your lab. You have a rack of zillions of bottles. And you better label them correctly. But instead of having an expensive instrument at each location.
It's not an expensive instrument, but at this point we're talking the concept. Do you think it's a good idea to collect some early information or some existing information on Mara Vista before you start putting in the sewer system?
I think it's absolutely essential that we do it and then we follow it with time after we've done it. I mean, it's the way of seeing what you've done has had some impact.
Right?
Yeah, I was just wondering, we've been out with Mike McGrath.
Yes.
And he's presented several times, and one of his views is that the only nitrogen we need to worry about is that within 200 feet of the shore or something.
Right.
I think it's
Some
what he
number
said.
like that, yeah.
So it'd be interesting. This may actually help answer his viewpoint, because if we've got a transect going up, we can see what's happening.
That's a good point.
Coming down. So it could be that, but then that may be an interesting information if it's done relatively soon, because we may need to reconsider some things. But
Well, and that dovetails to that you want to talk with whoever's doing them.
well, if there's a way to...
Mara Vista is such a nice grid, and all of those roads, which the town owns, for most of them, go down and stop, just short of the water. So you could have you're talking about the variability. You could have a pretty good system for pretty cheap money to look at.
But you want to talk to somebody who would be doing the modeling and who doesn't have a vested interest in number of samples ahead of time
Yes.
as to what a good plan would be.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Well, I'm not hearing anybody who doesn't think it's worth going ahead with this, but obviously the details and the plan have to come back and make some sense.
Okay. Well, then I'll pursue that.
Terrific.
I'll write an RFP.
Shellfish demonstration project update and Woods Hole Group reports, review and vote to accept. The reports were sent around. I'm sure everyone's read them from cover to cover.
I move to accept them.
Second.
Further discussion?
Yeah. Okay, I just had one thing. There was, I just noted one thing in them, and that is that there was a change from the presentation to the Conservation Commission. And the change was that at the Conservation Commission and all the reports up to them, the estimate was that on a seasonal basis, that 26% of the nitrogen would be removed from, or the total nitrogen going into Little Pond, for example. But in this one, and I talked with Sia about this, the change is that it's about 15% of the year-round nitrogen going in. So that's just a change. I mean, it's qualified that way.
Stop me if you've heard this one before.
Right.
I understand that's been an issue for right along.
No, it's not an issue really. I mean, it adds up if you look at the total aspect. But so it's good to have both numbers in mind, because if it turns out ultimately, although we're just in the beginning of this, that we really only need to deal with the seasonal nitrogen in these estuaries, as Brian Howes has basically said, as far as water quality is concerned, that it may be that the that 26% figure is something to look at. But if it's a 15% figure, well, however it works out, we're going to learn. But the point is that I just noticed that was a change, and it's a because we're basically doing an ecosystem study here with all these water quality monitoring programs and everything. So we'll be getting more concrete understanding as we move ahead. But I just wanted to mention that there was that change, and for whatever, So.
I just wanted to point out that there are 4 tech memos. There's 4 tech memos, and then there are 2 shellfish. In tech memo 3, which is the codification of the specifications and the cost estimates for the purposes of determining whether we were going to note a difference when we were monitoring, it's still a % of the seasonal load.
Okay.
In that tech report. In the final tech report, which has to do with TMDL compliance, it's annual. So Woods Hole Group did a great job of giving us just-in-time information so that we could make a decision about how many oysters to put in the ground this year, and we did it, and they're growing and they're doing fantastic. The early planning documents were to try and determine, John and I worked together to say, are we going to detect a signal? We're going to any change in this nitrogen concentration? And that's where the seasonal load sort of concept was born. It was, we're going to be looking at this now, what are we going to see? But then in his final report, which is the last report you saw, that's what he went to the annual.
I think one of the things is, and if you've said it, and I think it's not quite accurate. The TMDL does not say it's a seasonal load. They've modeled during the season, and then they extrapolated and gave a annual load. There's been a court case, U.S. District Court, and I'll send it to you in D.C., that said total maximum daily load means total maximum daily load. The court ordered EPA not to use seasonal loads. So that's something the state, we can argue with the state later, but right now, that's something, the facts are that a TMDL is an annual load.
Just one little comment on that. I served as a regulator like Jerry did. Jerry's career was as a regulator. And it's good to look at the regulatory viewpoint, but what happens is that science sometimes, knowledge, changes the regulations. And it could be that from our little program here, we may be learning things that may actually be very important for how we look at the estuaries and how to deal with them.
Right.
We don't know yet, but the thing is that it isn't that everything is fixed in concrete. It's just sort of, we'll find out. Anyway.
No,
Okay.
I want to give you and you great credit for making this probably our most successful program so far.
Well, listen, it's really, well, see ya. Okay, it's really, but you know, I was out there a couple days ago and you know, there was Dan Fugere out there working the bags and it was like, whoa, you know, this is amazing to see the coordination, the way it came together, the Woods Hole group, the design, you know, I have to say, you know, the Marine Environmental Services Department and it has been stunning. And it's not been easy because it's a whole add-on to their program, right?
That's right.
And so, but they took it with real gusto, got into it. So I have to say that, you know,
And I
that's
have to
the
name
crux,
Chuck Martinson.
Yeah.
He
Yes.
calls me. Chuck and I talk every day. We follow up. We have things that we discuss. He moves forward. I mean, he is so committed. He calls me at 6 o'clock at night. I mean, I pick up the phone, but he calls me because he cares that much about what's going on. It's just, he's been fantastic.
I mean, you know, when he talks about the growth of the oysters, his eyes open to the size of
His
the thing.
babies.
It's like, you see how, you look at that, you know, because he's just a
He's
co-hog,
great.
you know, and it's sort of
And you
a,
think of all the issues that we faced in the thing. People said you couldn't grow oysters there. People said you should be growing mussels. People said 100 different things.
well, first the regulators said we couldn't do it.
Yes.
Yes, we weren't going to get the upwellers. They weren't gonna be-
No, it's been but this committee has
bags
been,
weren't going to get put together. I mean, every
Yeah.
step of the way, you
Yeah.
just overcame these major obstacles and made it work.
yeah, it's
We weren't
going,
going to be able to
yeah.
buy the shellfish in time. Remember, we built the money.
Ties.
You know, every step of the way was a
Right.
struggle, but you made it happen. Huh?
And now we know how to overwinter them, so everything's good for next year.
Oh, that decision has been made?
Yeah, what's the story on that?
We have an overwintering plan. I mean, it's not completely finalized, but the idea is we're going to submerge the early batch.
Yes.
The bigger ones are getting submerged, and the late batch is getting pitted.
Okay, we'll
That's
be
for their
in
smaller.
refrigeration.
Well, we should, yeah.
You gotta go to
Well,
the
we're still
contract.
debating, I mean, I don't know if we want to put so many in pitting.
We're not
You
gonna
know,
pit that many.
We should put them in this edge on the safer side, but test the other, because it's a demonstration project. So, you know, so we'll do a combination of things, I think,
Okay.
with a few.
So we need a motion to vote to accept the
We did.
whole group reports.
It's already moved and
It's been
seconded.
moved and seconded. Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. SMAS technical memos were also sent around. Anybody have?
Are those, you emailed them?
I emailed the tech memo. Yep, I emailed the tech memos. They are the the pre-oyster, the 2012 data. These had come in earlier this summer, and we were so wrapped up doing other things that we never formally reviewed them and accepted them as drafts so that they could make them final. So this was a bit of housekeeping. I've reviewed them. So it's the pre-oyster 2012 baseline. And the sown data that they were supposed to be giving us over the summer, which they did, and then the May, June, July data collection that they did for this year. The next report that we're waiting for is the big chunk of data. Little Pond, Bourne's Pond, and West Falmouth Harbor, and Oyster Pond. So those are forthcoming. So this is.
I'll have to, somehow I just missed that.
I just,
I
Want me to
haven't
resend it? I'm happy to resend it.
It was buried in there, you're right.
Yeah, it was there. I moved to accept it, but there was one incredibly annoying paragraph where it says that SMAS scientists determined that it was important to measure nitrogen before the oysters. I think this,
Okay.
I think this committee, but I still move
give
to
it
accept
them.
it.
Yeah.
Have you read them?
Yes, I've looked at them. There were some points, we saw them earlier on when they first started coming in, and I looked at them, and there's some, the presentation I would like in some of the graphs to be a little different, because it's hard to interpret, because the y-axis is different. So it's like when you try to overlay the data to see what it's hard to figure out. I don't mind using log axes and linear, but it would be nice to have at least the linear to the linear or the log to the log, so you could see the two. So there were a few like that, and they came back and said, well, that's the way we do it, or whatever they said.
Well, they said there was a reason why they couldn't do it that way.
Yeah, but I don't know what it was.
I don't remember.
I just thought, for me,
July.
I don't have that kind of mathematical rigor to be able to to work things and look at things that way. So I can model things, but
Well,
Well,
yeah.
it says review and vote to accept. I haven't read it, but I trust your judgment and that
Well, it's just data,
it's just
basically.
It's basically data.
It's just
Yeah,
the data.
we certainly want to move it along.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah, considering where we've been with SMAS, I think
Yes.
we're in a good place. So, motion has been made and seconded to accept these technical memos from SMAS. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, report, filing of CWMP, hearings, vote on comment period extension. Jerry?
The GHD did a pre-printing of the 2 volumes in an executive summary. We got 3 full sets. One for the committee, gave it to Virginia, but she did most of the pre-editing, one for DPW and one for the town manager's office. The rest will be coming in within a week. But we wanted to get it into MEPA and the Cape Cod Commission such that we were well ahead of the MEPA's deadline. We get it in before the 15th. It gets published on
21st.
21st, okay?
Environmental monitor.
In the environmental monitor. We're well ahead of that. Cape Cod Commission wanted early reports so they could start reviewing it early because they wanted to schedule a hearing, or they will schedule a hearing. We had our choice of, not that we had our choice. They said, did you want it town meeting week? We said, no. We'd be exhausted. So that pushed it. We couldn't have it earlier because I think of some advertising deadlines. It pushed it back to the next week. And the earliest they could do it would be like the 19th. The comment period would have closed on the 20th, day before Thanksgiving. It would have been put a burden, it will put a burden on them to get the comments out. Some people had wanted additional period to review it. We can request an extension to December 4th, I think we said.
That's what the email said.
Yeah, December 4th. That way it will be out front, it will be early, Cape Cod Commission will know it. They can announce it at the hearing, and with some luck, they might even be able to put it in the environmental monitor that the town has requested an extension of the comment period. That extension will not significantly delay our ability to have a certificate by late December, early January.
Right.
It takes it out of the Thanksgiving holiday and before the Christmas holiday. So a vote by the committee to request that, I think, would go a long way in town manager being happy that, and they had told me over the phone, but I'll validate it, can I request that versus going through the selectmen, which can't be done this week, and then I think they're off next week for a holiday.
Right.
I think it's administration. We're requesting an extension. But I don't think the town manager wanted to do it if this committee did not want to allow the extension.
Right. Okay, can I get a motion to allow the extension?
Okay, so it basically extends the period during which MEPA can receive comments.
Yes.
The original deadline would have been November 20th, and it now becomes December 4th, which is, both of those are Wednesdays.
It's 2 weeks.
And so it adds 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And I think having more time for people to be able to comment is good.
When is the original meeting?
The hearing?
The hearing is the 19th of November, and that's a Tuesday.
So the 20th would have been...
And the 20th is just not
That
realistic.
would have been right.
I'll move to accept.
Okay, moved and seconded
Second,
to accept the recommendation of a 2-week extension of the comment period. All
Right,
in
so-
favor?
and
December.
let's just have the date, and so that the comment period closes on December 4th.
And
Okay.
just wondering, so the documents, the printed documents, we'll get them, but they'll be like in the library or libraries? and other places?
Everybody here will get them. Everybody that commented on the draft will get them. There will be plenty of copies. Part Probably too many, but that's the way it goes. If you commented on the draft, you get it. Each of you are going to get volumes 1 and 2. You can hold it up. It's not that thick.
Yeah.
So and they will go to the library.
And it will be in the library.
And I've got the disc, and I'm going to
That's
post
right.
it as soon as I can.
So the people who commented last summer, or whatever,
On
Yes.
the draft.
on the draft, the earlier one, the preliminary draft, then there was a draft.
The official
The
draft
one that went to Boston.
that went
Last-
to Boston.
The one that went to Boston.
The
okay.
draft
Yeah.
CWMP, that was the official one. Anybody
Right.
whose comments
right,
were, anybody that commented to the secretary on that
Right, okay.
got a copy.
It's
That means you get a copy,
It's
though,
also
then you-
available in the Mashpee Board and Sandwich libraries.
And it will be, okay, but, okay, so then it's the Cape Cod Commission's meeting then, that
It's
would,
a joint hearing
It's a
Yeah.
Joint hearing, yeah.
who's the
with
joint?
MEPA. MEPA doesn't always show up, and I think they very rarely show up because of agreements. It's part of their process, and so the Cape Cod Commission will definitely be there chairing it. I don't know if
Right.
MEPA will be there. They'll be interested in their comments, in the written comments, of course.
Is it like that meeting that they had in the Herman Room in the library?
Well, it won't be like that, we hope.
Better not be like that.
I hope it will
We
be.
are going to urge the commission to get rid of this 3-minute rule of theirs. When the public wants to say something, they should have more than 3 minutes, especially people who've gone to the trouble of paying attention to this stuff and going to the meeting.
I would appreciate it.
We thought it was ridiculous last year, and
At the last minute,
we'll point
when we
that out.
came in,
Yeah.
there were no rules set ahead of time.
No, that was not a fair way to treat people, and we're going to urge them not to do
So,
that.
and when will we actually see that? I've heard that there were comments made about our comments, but I've never seen them.
They've been posted on the website and since July.
The response to the comments?
Response to comments?
It was in the preliminary draft.
The response to comments was in the preliminary draft. It's appendix
Well,
4 point something.
It's
it really would have been nice to get that to the people that did that.
Well,
Because
until it was approved by the selectmen, it wasn't going to go any further than being on the web.
correct.
I didn't even know, I mean, I sometimes look at the web but I didn't really
Well,
go deep enough in it.
And we
Well,
actually
so-
mentioned it at a meeting, but it was mentioned at a
Well-
meeting that the comments were up.
People go through the trouble of writing to the state and writing to the Cape Cod Commission and to everybody with their comments. It would be nice if they hear that there's a reply to their comments. And that word is to be found. I mean, I didn't.
Well, you are being sent
Yes.
a full volume of this whole thing now.
But it's a year later and we didn't know that
Well,
it was.
it wasn't approved by the town of Falmouth till the first week of August.
Your comments to our comments?
Right. We drafted them. The selectmen are the ones who
Right.
adopt them or not.
I think it was one of the few meetings when you weren't here that this committee was
But it
discussing.
would be nice if we got just a message about it.
Well-
We go through this effort for years and we don't hear a thing.
Report of committee members and staff. We have a bunch of things here, and it's 10:30, so we may not want to talk about all of them. I think we've done enough on Site 7 for one night. Pump stations, there's really nothing to talk about. PRBs, there is. The last meeting we had was a little bit discouraging on the PRBs. Most of their techniques that they had been proposing, at least for Seacoast Shores, involve inappropriate amount of digging in residential neighborhoods.
Deep digging.
Deep, 40 feet deep. 40 feet deep
Infeasible
trench is not
amount of digging.
A feasible option, I don't think, in Seacoast Shores. So the conversation has moved. They're looking at other options in the PRB line that don't involve a 40-foot trench, and we're hoping to get a price tag and some evidence that some of these different ideas have some viability. But it's less viable, at least on that site, than we were thinking it would be.
And they're going to have, excuse me, Mr. They're going to have some costs. I think they had some ballpark costs of what we thought it could be. I think it was like West Falmouth and then.
Right, the West Falmouth site is actually not too bad because you don't have to go too deep. But Seacoast you would have to go deep,
Or the other place.
or what was it?
Great
Harbors.
Great Harbors,
Great
not
Harbors.
as deep, but deep. And so it's not a magic bullet, or at least the original representation that it might be more viable in more places than we were thinking is not panning out.
Well,
Yeah.
in line with cup is half full, you may not want to hear this, but it's better to find out on the paper stage that something doesn't work than after you dig it and wait a few years.
Right.
Well, it was expensive. Didn't say it wouldn't work. It's just that it may not be practicable to be replicated because
Right.
you have to go 40 feet.
Right.
The places where they used to do these things successfully were uninhabited.
Oh,
When you start trying to do them along a public road, where there's trees, where there's gardens, where there's
Gas mains.
gas mains, where there's water mains, where there's mailboxes, where there's driveways, there's a whole lot of stuff that gets in your way. And when you're trying to dig a 40-foot deep trench, it becomes a practical impossibility, is what
Right.
we're going.
Almost all the prior art was agricultural.
Or
industrial.
polluted sites at military
Super
bases.
fun.
Right,
things like
right.
that.
There was some place where somebody
neighbors.
already owns a backhoe,
Right.
and they have some laborers there who they don't know what to do that day,
Well,
and there's nothing in the way, and they go out there and they have some free
No,
wood
no,
chips.
no,
and-
no.
Nothing-
I'm exaggerating.
nothing in the way.
Yes,
That
it
was
was.
Nothing in the
usually-
way.
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
So, yeah, I mean, you were there.
Yes.
No, I just recall that early on, even in West Falmouth, there was a question because at one point I think P.O. Lombardo was saying it would have to be 70 feet deep. I'm not sure what site it was.
Yeah.
But when they said it's just not going to work there.
No.
But 40 feet deep on these peninsulas seems, I mean, if we look at the Webner trial, I don't even know how deep that was, but that seemed to work. And I'm just wondering, but they were in the beach, you know,
Yes,
kind of thing.
and they only went down about 20 feet. The piece that was new that got us to this really deep layer was they felt that if you had to recover 100% of the nitrogen, which for Seacoast Shores that's the case, then this PRB has to go down until it intersects the saltwater interface. And you have to monitor and make sure that the fact that you've installed this PRB, that the fresh water isn't actually going underneath the PRB, and so that's why they said you've got to go down into the freshwater interface. They're basically, fresh water is lighter than salt water, so it floats on salt water. So you basically have gone down far enough that the fresh water won't go there. So that added additional cost and complexity. And the second thing that came out of the discussion was, in order to prove the effectiveness of the PRB, there is a significant amount of monitoring that has to be done, and I can't tell you how complex the monitoring wells, the type, the number, the positioning upstream and downstream, both to see the effect of it and also to make sure, again, that the water, which contains the nitrates, wasn't going around the ends or going underneath. So when you began to add up all of these things, you had a real construction difficulty.
CDM Smith is also doing projects on Long Island.
Yes.
We keep asking them about that, and they keep giving us the dance. Well, we submitted our report to the blah, blah, blah group in Long Island, and we say, are they building anything? Well, no, they have budget constraints, and they're not actually building anything, so.
They've selected one site, was the information we have, but they haven't built it.
I think one of the things, Mr. Chairman, is that the data doesn't belong to a consultant. It belongs to the person that hired the consultant. Professionally, they have to have the permission of that entity to release the data.
Right.
And for a variety of reasons, you know,
They can't.
they've tried. I don't think
You
it's a
think
matter
they've
of...
tried? 'Cause that
I think so. I thought Virginia was going to
My recollection
call.
was they asked Virginia to go try.
I was going to say, if we know the name of the municipal entity, I would think they would respond favorably to another municipality. Or they
Well,
might.
we have not revisited that issue.
Good point.
And it's far enough down, but the last I heard was they had a site, but they hadn't built
They
it,
hadn't built it.
and there was only one
So the only experience is from Falmouth then with these things?
And that's a very different.
Well,
No, I mean.
No,
like
well,
the
Quart
web
Bay.
Walk
thing,
point,
Yeah.
walk point.
But there's no other example of the same kind of
There are, but
application?
they're on a small scale, or they're the military reservation
No,
specific.
I mean like our type of setting. No.
Or no,
we would have been the first.
yes, we're in the
To put it
forefront
ground,
on
Which
this.
is what we're trying to be on all these things, but
Mr. Chair, wasn't it also said by them at one point that didn't they admit that you had to replenish them every 20 years or so?
yeah.
Well, they weren't
Well,
sure about
Replenish,
that.
time unknown, but
It was the
maybe
carbon source,
the
remember?
carbon source.
And they came up with the idea of pumping in an emulsified vegetable
Oh,
oil.
that's right.
Which now
Right.
triggers a underground injection permit.
Right.
It's not difficult, but it just triggers another permit.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we still need to they're going to give us an idea what the cost would be.
Oh,
Yeah, yes, we're
Because
going to
it
proceed through this
may be
analysis.
expensive, but it may not be, comparatively speaking, could be cheaper than some other options. We
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's
So that's where we are at this point.
Cape Cod Commission 208 planning,
I think we could say that it's
we'll save that.
well underway. They clearly have their system of involving the public set out, and so they're having both regional meetings and watershed grouping, I guess you'd call it. There are 11 of the watershed grouping meetings, and then they've had ones like the one you just mentioned that they're having special technical meetings. So they're really digging into what they think the planning should be.
I attended a meeting today of municipalities that went over fact sheets because one of the I don't know if it was sent out, there was one fact sheet that was almost spreadsheet that was impossible to read. It lists every technology and it goes on for 2 miles. So they put in a fact sheet and we reviewed the fact sheet and it had some significant errors. I don't know how it got by. It's sort of like they said inlet widening was 100% nitrogen removal.
Whoops.
Whoops.
We spent 3 hours.
How nice.
We spent 3 hours this morning
Well, if it's
trying to clean it up so that it's
shallow
fair.
estuary, right? You might do it, but
Well, depends on where it is. The
Yeah.
It doesn't remove
tide
nitrogen.
isn't a very strong
right.
pump.
That
Well,
was
not
just
here, not
a,
here.
a
Not
simple
here.
example of that.
You
I
make
think
it really
There were a lot of
wide so it
mistakes.
becomes a
Funding.
cove in Vineyard Sound.
Funding.
Right.
Where it goes. Yeah.
But once again, the only
was
hard
watched
data
on it?
that is going to ever exist is the stuff that we're going to produce.
Yeah.
Right.
All the rest of it is just them regurgitating their own estimates and
Right.
guesses. Bourne's Pond fishing site. It has gone from the south side to the north side to the side.
Really?
Well, I think part of it was, I think there's a consensus, but Ray brought up a good point. Let's double check with fishing, natural fish. It appears the north side seems to be the best for fishing because on the inlet tide, the bait comes in and the bigger fish in the pond swim around that. And then the day I went out there with Ray, sure enough, there were people fishing on the sides.
North side.
On the-
Either side.
On
of
the
north
edge.
side.
You're saying on the edges
Yeah.
of the inlet.
Yeah.
The edges of the inlet
Right.
on the
Edges.
north side.
Right.
Then we got into a discussion of how much would it be to do a little improvement to the jetty there versus putting, I call it a catwalk over the bridge. The cost seemed to get a little bit extreme to put a catwalk over the bridge. I think it was $500,000, which there were reasons for it. So we're going to have the Fish and Game people come out with our consultants to see if we can come up with a reasonable solution. Right now, it looks like it would be an approved fishing area on either side of the bridge. Improve if the wetlands people let us, but we need a jetty there and abutment anyways. And then there's some safety issues about people crossing the street that, because it's no longer just a jetty, it's going to be a fishing something, and it's an attractive nuisance, and the question is, yes, we'll have to put railings around it, maybe some mild lighting so we don't get people's aesthetics upset with a street light there, crosswalks, and we'll work it through, but it's,
What's Green Pond? Is there crosswalks and everything there, and lighting and everything,
It's
or?
on the south side.
It's on the south side.
But there's lighting and there's crosswalks.
There's a sidewalk all the way,
Yeah,
almost
sidewalk, yeah.
all the way
Sidewalk.
up. There is no sidewalk. You have to have a sidewalk over a bridge.
He's talking about the sidewalk
Oh, the-
connecting to the sidewalk on the bridge.
Yes, I'm
And on
sorry.
the north
okay.
side, we don't have
Oh,
that
right,
in
that's
Bourne's
right,
Pond,
that's
it's on
right,
the
yeah,
south
yeah,
side.
And there's also a parking area where there isn't one in Green.
Steve,
I'm not even remotely a fisherman, but there's some state money available for things like that.
This is the
That's
guy
what
you're
Well,
talking
that's where this started.
that's what we're talking
Oh,
about.
That's how
okay.
it started.
They came and said, we have state money and let's get it in on the planning
Oh,
this
okay.
early, and that's when we discovered everything's more
It's the money
complicated.
from the fishing licenses,
Yes,
apparently.
Yeah.
yeah, no, it would be that money, not
Right.
ours. But,
And we're gonna find out how
But-
much, whether it's a grant or it's just, we pay for it, then they reimburse us.
but you're right, that's where the money would come from. All right, discussion and vote on minutes of prior meeting.
Oh, wait, I had one more
Oh,
thing,
yeah, sure.
one more report. We did have the oyster aquaculture
Field trip.
demonstration,
Yes,
field trip
yes.
that was attended by very important and
Luminaries.
luminaries from the town.
Town manager?
So, yeah, town manager was there. It was, but it was very, it was great fun
Yeah.
to do it. But it was nice to see, for folks to see and get a sense of it and hear from the neighbor as well. So that was a good,
Yeah,
a good
that's great.
experience. Yeah. So,
Any other reports of committee members or staff? If not, we'll move on to discussion and vote on minutes of prior meeting. Everyone has seen the minutes of the prior meeting and digested them.
We have two. Move the minutes of August 29th and September 5th.
Move to accept both.
Moved and seconded to accept those two sets of minutes. Any discussion?
I had sent some comments on which one, I don't remember anymore.
I'm moving the August 5th revised
Oh, okay,
with your
okay.
comments
Okay.
included.
Okay,
Yeah.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Matt's not here, but if someone wants to make a motion to adjourn, it will be gratefully accepted.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your patience.